This weekend, Northern Ireland Pro Wrestling holds one of its biggest shows to date, Wrestleclash, now confirmed to be held in the Lions Den Pro Wrestling Dojo, one of the best and most unique atmospheres in all of Irish wrestling. This is going to be a show that's going to be monumental for many reasons. You have the return of Pure Filth. You have Damien Corbin versus Colin Black for the Resolution Heavyweight Championship. You're going to see our very own Joe Lean cash in and get his shot at Jordan Nelson's NXT Junior Heavyweight Championship. So many great things happening. But the most special thing that's happening on this card is you're going to see History Reborn, a title that is coming back and it is identifying the very best young talent in Irish wrestling. It's coming all the way from stateside to Northern Ireland. The NWF Worlds Heavyweight Championship is making its return. It's going to happen this weekend in a best for three match, the rubber match, as Ben Nelson goes up against the Canary Kid. Best of three, it's tied at 1-1. And a very special guest we have right now. We have the founder of the NWF, multiple time World Heavyweight Champion, none other than Crusher Crossen, who will also be the special guest referee.
Hey, Johnny, great to meet you finally. I've seen lots of you on video, and it's finally good to see you somewhat in person, at least.
Yeah, well, ahead of this weekend anyway, and it's great to meet you as well. Well, we spoke last night in Keaton's podcast also.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
But now getting to speak in this environment, this is where I was holding back at times last night where I was wanting to pick at your brain. And I had to remember I was the guest.
I know. So we talked a little bit about Canary and Ben on that show, and I didn't want to. I know we were going to talk about it more, during this interview. So I thought didn't want to talk too much about it, right?
Yeah, give too much away.
Yeah.
So first of all, how are you? Looking forward to coming to Ireland. What's your mind?
Absolutely. I mean, I can't wait. I mean, I've never been to Europe and Ireland, and it's just all the history and everything, and just to see just to be on the island, I think it's going to be just fantastic. And I'm really looking forward to coming over there. I really am.
Yeah. It'll be great to have you as well. And also to see that belt come over here onto the Irish shore, that's going to be something special as well. So first of all, let's get straight into it, Crusher. Mm-hmm. For anybody that's watching that maybe isn't familiar with you, let's just introduce yourself. I know I done a wee bit at the start, but I feel you can do it a lot better than me. Just give the guests a rundown who you are and why you're coming over.
Sure. So everybody gets their start in pro wrestling differently, and my start was really different because I was 14 years old, much like Ricky when he started. But I started without the opportunity to get trained because nobody would train us in those. This is 1984. Trainers weren't training kids. It just wasn't, unless you were a relative or something, you might get a chance. But otherwise, you just weren't being trained, or used or anything.
What age then was it accepted back then to get in?
Back in the day,
like what would have been
you had to be an adult, so 18. They weren't even looking at 16, 17-year-olds to be tough, and you needed to be a very good athlete in these days, like usually bigger guys, because this is the era of the big,
Yeah.
So small guys, if you're under 200 and 200 and some pounds, you weren't really viable. So there just wasn't a whole big avenue for small guys and young guys. And I was a kid, so I got into wrestling, I guess, when I called my friend up and I asked him what he was doing on a Sunday morning, and he said he had to go. He's in a super hurry. He's like frantic, and I'm like, "But what's going on?" I could tell he was preoccupied with something, but I wasn't sure what it was. And he finally blurted out, "He goes, Hulk Hogan's got a pair of brass knuckles. He's gonna hit Nick Bockwinkel. I'll call you back." And he hung up. And I knew he was watching wrestling, so I had not watched it too much up until then, Johnny. But I thought, gosh, this sounds interesting. I got to see what's happening here myself. So I turned on the TV, and whatever he was watching, I got sucked into. And that whole Hogan Bockwinkel feud in the AWA just sucked me right in. And then I became an instant fan from that point on. And that's how I got into wrestling.
For anybody unfamiliar, so the Hulk Hogan and the AWA, at that time, was there any wee glimpses of what was to come in terms of Hulkamania, the personality, the larger-than-life persona?
Oh, absolutely. Hulkamania was born in the AWA. In fact, he was calling himself Hulkamania, and there was Hulkamania banners and stuff in the crowd. That all started in the AWA. That's why
See,
Vince was
I
very
knew there was
smart.
hints of it, but I didn't know. And now that surprises me about the banners and that he was actually using Hulkamania. Can you elaborate a wee bit more on that if you can?
Yeah, because like, well, the Hulk Hogan thing started from the Rocky movie. That's where he got really noticed from Rocky. Before that, he was just he's Hulk Hogan, but from the Rocky movie that really brought him out. And I remember Heenan, the Heenan and the Heenan family, they would really get on him. Like when he was doing the movie in the AWA, when it came out, he was in the AWA, and they would, his name was Thunderlips in the Rocky movie, and Heenan's like, yeah, you come in here, Thunderlips. He kept referring to him as Thunderlips, really just throwing this in, thinking you're a big movie star and everything, you're going to come into here. And, they were just really using that in the heel tactic for, to go against Hogan. See, Hogan came in at first and he was that kind of a heel, but the fans
Yeah,
just cheered him in the AWA. So as much as Vern was trying to have him be a heel, he realized this is not going to work. We're going to have to make him a baby face. And so that's how it happened. I mean, fans just loved him.
yeah.
And Hogan in the AWA was huge. Like, compared to the WWF Hogan that showed up, the guy in the AWA, he was just a big invincible guy, and he would take on all the evildoers, like in the AWA at the time, Ken Patera, Jesse the Body Ventura, and the whole Heenan family, Big Bad Bobby Duncan was another one, and it was just great to see him, see that. So what sucked me in with Hogan was his charisma, that larger than life attitude he had, and his early AWA interviews were just very authentic and very, very much. When he went to the WWF, because like one of the things Hogan did in the AWA that Vern taught him was to never go off his feet. So like he'd start hulking up. That was all Vern. Vern's the one that
Right.
told him
Okay.
to do that. Yeah. Some people don't realize that would be something Vern would want, but that was what he wanted. He wanted this, like, be this invincible guy. And Hogan's like, well, I wasn't trained that way. Am I going to get a lot of heat from the guys if I don't, help sell and stuff? Put them over. He goes, no. This is how we're gonna, we're gonna build you up and make
And
this big
was there
name.
any heat?
No. Well, Jesse
No.
Ventura was a little. I think there was an issue with Ventura and Hogan. Like a.
Right. Okay. Well, them two personalities in real life do seem like they could clash.
Yeah, I think there was some things there I remember reading about. But no, otherwise Hogan was just a bigger than life character. But that's what I liked about Hulk. And then later on, as I got into more wrestling, then the other ones that influenced me heavily was Ric Flair. Just not so much as cheating, but the style, just the whole technical side of him, how he can do more of a technical match. I really like that about him. And then
Methodical.
what's that?
Methodical.
Oh yeah, methodical and just the way he would put moves together. I used to watch a lot of Flair for that. And then of course my drop kick, jumping Jim Brunzell. I mean, part of the high flyers, but his drop kick was perfect. And so that's what I always tried to do my drop kick as I learned it, as we went on, got into it. I always looked at his drop kick because I thought, him and Greg Gagne were a tag team. They both did the drop kick, but Greg Gagne was sloppy. He's all over the place. But Jim Brunzell was nice, crisp, feet together, perfect, perfect form, perfect shape. And that's what I always tried to do, as much as best I could, I guess. But he was my big influence for that. But no, so how it started though, Johnny, was I'm 14 years old and I'm a big fan. And really, we were born on cable television first, because I learned about how to make community television that came to our area. I think much like you guys, we only had a few channels at first. And then all of a sudden we got cable, and all of a sudden, boom, we get 40 channels. This was new to us. And one of the channels was a community channel that you could put your own programming on, that you produce, and everybody gets to see it. Now, this is before the internet. This is before YouTube, any of this. And this is our way.
Kind of mind blowing.
Yeah, it was kind of like our way of getting out there, right? But we didn't have, so we didn't know what we were going to do. But then finally I said, because it always bothered me. We got Little League football. When I say football, I'm talking American football. Little League football, Little League soccer, Little League baseball, hockey, all the Little League sports, even boxing. But we have wrestling, but not Little League professional wrestling. So why don't we start something for kids that we can do ourselves, and we'll make a show of this? And that's how we started the NWF. But it wasn't the NWF in the beginning. It had different names, in the first year, but there was a lot of growing pains. But we started out with, oh man, the early days, it was just rough. But we didn't know what we were doing. We were trying. We were
You're learning
mainly,
on the spot.
we were learning on the spot. We were mainly developing our characters in the beginning, and the wrestling wasn't nothing special, not at first. But over time, we just kept doing it. I mean, now you got to remember, Johnny, my vision. We're on my basement, just on some mattresses to start with, and I'm like, but in my head, I'm like, I want a professional ring. I want to be inside of an arena of some kind with people there, with multiple cameras, and I just want to have a big, I want to have this just like the AWA with an actual ring and everything. That was my goal right away. But we had not a dime. We were kids. We didn't have anything. How are we going to do this?
That's a lot of ambition, for a young age.
It was, and but little did I know, in 2 years' time we would be at that spot. So it was all, and the thing that gets everybody, that throws them for a loop, is there were no adults. It was me running it. Our parents supported us, but they let us run it. They were kind of, they were just, maybe they watched from afar to make sure things were on the, when we were younger, but as we got going with it, they just let us do our thing. And the intention, even though we weren't officially trained yet, because eventually I would meet Eddie Sharkey once I did a big event, and I caught his attention. He's a legendary trainer.
Yeah.
And he brought me into school, and he started smarting me up, because he wanted to do an event with us. And so, but he wanted to make sure that
for any of the younger fans, could you just elaborate on Eddie Sharkey, just who he was?
Yeah, Eddie Sharkey was his nickname was the Trainer of Champions. He trained Bob Backlund. People know who he is, WWF champion back in the day.
Yeah.
He's trained the Road Warriors. He's trained Jesse the Body Ventura, Rick Rude. Gosh, I mean, there's just so many people he's trained. He had Sean Walt. He's got credit for Sean Waltman, because Sean Waltman came through the PWA.
And that's the Hall of Famers then.
Yeah, I mean, this is Jerry Lynn. I mean, I'm trying to think of all of them, but there's so many. I'm probably forgetting some too, but those are the big ones. I said Jesse, right? Jesse Ventura. Yeah.
Jerry Lynn, I didn't know that one though. I love Jerry Lynn.
Gentleman Jerry Lynn. In fact, when I was training, and I was kind of wrapping up with training with Eddie, Jerry was just coming in. So, I seen him a lot at the training camp. I'd run into Sean Waltman too. We'd cross paths quite a bit when he first came in too. I was leaving, but he was coming in, and so yeah. But that's at the end of it, kind of towards the end of it more. But what Eddie wanted to do, he wanted to do an event with us after he's seen the big event we did, because I ended up doing a big Anoka Armory event. I just got this idea. We had done the cable show for a couple years, right? And we kept growing it little by little by little, getting it more and more and more. We started building our own rings, wrestling rings, because we didn't know how to get one. And luckily, after that first Armory card, they wrote a big article in the paper about us doing this big event, and some outfit.
Set the scene then, like the Armory, is that kind of like the Sportatorium in Dallas, Texas, like that sort of venue? Am I right there?
Yeah,
wrong?
It could seat I think up to 450 people. They had enough chairs. Our first event that we did at the Armory, we didn't know how many we were going to get. See, we had a cable show, and we had our cable show every week, and so we advertised the Armory show on that. So all our viewers that are tuning in all the time, well, that's where the bulk of, I think, of our draw came from, was the show. So, because everybody watched. And then we put posters up around town. And you got to remember, Johnny, nobody told me how to do any of this. So I'm just thinking, okay, we need I've seen other people do events. They put posters up. We're going to put posters up. We're going to sell tickets ahead of time. We're going to, and it's crazy to think that 16 years old, you could figure that out, but I did. And I'll tell you, we had to build a much more proper looking ring for this Armory too, because we had to make it look presentable. And we did. But the ring it's still not a functioning ring though. The ropes were and the posts, but it wasn't like a proper mat that you would be wrestling on that has give.
Okay.
So it was a very stiff ring, let's just say that. And we did this event. We didn't know how many people we were going to get. I think I had 60 some tickets sold in advance. So and it seats 450 something. I don't know what we're going to get here. And we need more than that, because I have a lot of bills due. I had to take a lot of advance money from my parents to build that ring. And we owed the Armory as well. We have to pay them at the end of the night. And so we were just hoping. And then we got another, 250 people through the door. So we have between 300 and 350 people in there. don't know the exact head count, but it was right in that range. And that was like, I didn't think we had that kind of a draw. So that was pretty. That was pretty good. And they knew what they were seeing. They were, you could tell they were fans because they all got into it, with the wrestlers. The very first one, they didn't know what to do. We had the Tokyo Terror against the Black Panther, and they should have been booing the Tokyo Terror. See, this is back in, Japan, Pearl Harbor for us, Tokyo Terror is going to be a bad guy and a heel. And, but they didn't know how to, we're kids though, so they weren't sure. But then after, I think the next match, we had our Super D's, a lightweight tag team, who went on to become professional soccer players. They were just athletes. But at this point, they're 10 years old, but they're still good. And they went against the Sheik and one of the rough Russians. And when we announced the Sheik, boy, then it didn't take the crowd long to figure out they were going to boo for the bad guys and cheer for the good guys, Let's put it in simple terms.
They caught on to it quick.
But no, I was going to say though, this event it was a huge success for us, and we got enough money to, of course, pay everything off, and then I had some money left over. But the one thing that happened is our ring didn't hold up. We were getting too many guys in there, and one of the corner sections gave out, and I'm like, when they wrote this big article for us in the paper, I had mentioned that we need to get a better ring. We're gonna have to do something different here because this isn't. We want to come back, but we got to do something different. And just as luck would have it, some group out in 60 miles out of the town, the metro, read that they had an actual professional wrestling ring, and they weren't using it. And I think because we were just a group of kids doing this and it was so genuine, they wanted. I think they would have gave it to us. They gave this.
One day help.
They gave it. Basically, it was $300 cash for that ring, and I tell people that price. I've got a 20-foot. It's a 20 by 20 pro wrestling ring. Proper rings, steel and everything, just a legitimate ring, and then we got it for $300 cash. People are still scratching, even in that time period. And the ring like that.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. $300 was a lot back then, but even back then, that's still cheap.
Oh gosh, yeah, you're probably talking $1,500, $2,000 for a ring like that back then.
Really?
Yeah, just in the cost of steel back then, yeah. So, and when we got that ring, that's when our wrestling really started getting better, because now we had the confidence to bump. When you bump in a stiff ring, even though we're kids, and like I do it, some of us would do it, but some of the other kids, they just hesitate because it's like, it would be like going in your living room floor, it's very stiff. And when we get the actual pro ring, and these were the breakdown rings, so they had a center spring. That's how they used to do them. So the whole platform had give. And then you have there's just a sense of comfort level. You get a lot more. First thing I noticed, I had a lot more confidence, and so did everybody else.
Yeah.
And so it didn't take too long for us to start polishing up that stuff, and we started getting better with the wrestling. And that's when, after I did this event, I went and I met Eddie Sharkey. He heard about the event. Now this is a legendary promoter, right? He's doing his own indie fed as well, and he does smaller cards like we did, but he wasn't drawing 300 people. See, his shows maybe get 50 people or so in a lot of bars settings and stuff, 50, 60 people, kind of like a dojo crowd, Lions and Dojo, maybe a bit more. But when he heard we had 300, he's like, I remember when I met him, the first thing he said, I went to one of his shows and I got back because he heard we were there, and he invited us to come back because we wanted to meet him. Me and Steve Engstrom, the guy that was on the show with me. And he said, oh, it's you guys. Yeah, I heard about you guys. He points to me, he goes, first, goes, one of these days, me and you, we got to do a card together sometime. Right away, he just wanted to. And he was just, Eddie Sharkey's the kind of guy. I'm 16 years old, Johnny, and I really don't know what I'm doing. I think I do, though, but I don't. And Eddie Sharkey's this legendary guy, but he made me feel at his level. He made me feel like an equal. And he treated me like an adult. I remember that. And I was 16, and I was being treated like an actual adult with him. Like he did not look at me as a kid.
It says a lot about the man. If you say it yourself, anybody that knows the name knows the reputation. As you say, a legendary promoter. So there's this legendary promoter, and he's drawn 50 people. And there's this bunch of kids, and they're drawing 5-6 times that. Like, it could have been very easy for him to take the hump over that. Do you know what I mean? Like, there'd be a lot of ones would take that the wrong way, but he's took you on board and done the right thing. Gave you a platform, gave you advice, talk to me about that.
Yeah, so then, I mentioned to Eddie, because at that first event, Jim Mitchell, another promoter in the area who used to work for the AWA, was also showed up just to see what we're doing. He was curious. And he's at the end of the show, he came up to me, shook my hand, said good show and everything, and talked a little bit. And then just a little, not much other than a handshake and a few words, and then he had left. And I told Eddie, I said, Eddie, Jim Mitchell, a guy by the name of Jim Mitchell showed up. He's like, he's bad news, kid. Stay away from him. And I just realized right there that they don't like each other. So
yeah.
and if Eddie's gonna, and Eddie, what he wanted me to do is he said, we'd like you to, why don't you come down to the camp, and we'll, I'd like to, kind of evaluate, see kind of where you're at, because, and I think he never really said, but I think in my mind, I'm thinking he wants to see where we're at because he wants to get us up to speed if we're going to do a show with them. Is what I was thinking. And then I'm pretty sure that's what it was, because we didn't do a show right away. It was after 6 months of training with them or so. And we did the show. But so first time, me and Steve, Steve was, I keep mentioning Steve, he was Mr. X or Pretty Boy Taylor. He was a little bit older than, he was an adult, but here's the thing, he's the only adult with us, but he joined saying he was 16. But he looked young, but he was actually in his young 20s.
Right, okay.
So he's the adult that's with us. But I once he came, at some point he came to me and said, look, I'm not 16, I'm this old. And I said, and if you don't want me around, I get it. This is a kid's deal. But he was so helpful, Steve was. He was like he would always do whatever I asked. And so he's like a really good worker bee guy. And I thought, God, I can't get rid of him. But Steve is the thing. He's an adult, and he'll tell you too, even to this day. I'm not a leader. I just did whatever Sean said. That's kind of how Steve was. It was a weird relationship. I'm probably 8-9 years younger than him, but he's listening to me.
Yeah, he's him.
But he excellent bumper though, Steve. Steve was a natural bumper. Gosh, he was the best we had, but for taking bumps. Yeah. But anyways, when we got with Eddie, he wanted us to come down to the training camp and just kind of evaluate. And the first thing he asked me to do when we were there, he goes, no, just work. We're on just wrestling mat pads. We weren't in a ring. But he wanted us to work a little routine, just work some moves. He wants to kind of evaluate us. And that didn't bother me. We were bumping on hard surfaces, so I didn't care. So we did some things. But the first thing I did, I locked up like we lock up. We didn't know. I just locked up with both arms. And right away, he's like, nope, not like that. When you're going to lock up, it's collar and elbow. So collar and elbow. It's like that, he kind of showed us. And that was the first thing he showed. I mean, it's little things like that. He'd keep telling us. And then he'd watch us do a series of things. And he was
feeding you a bit of droplets of advice, just.
Exactly. And he was never belittling. He didn't say what the hell are you doing? Or anything like that. It was always like, he'd watch us do a sequence of something, and he'd say, okay, now this and this was good, but you got to finish it this way, or you got to change it up this way, or work off of this arm, or there's just little things like that he would just correct us on.
Yeah.
And
as you said, that's advice you wouldn't be getting anywhere else.
Would have never got that anywhere else. I tried to get a hold of Vern Gagne as well. AWA was in Minneapolis. That was their headquarters. So in addition,
what age would Vern Gagne around this time then?
What's that?
What age would Vern Gagne have been around that time?
He was in his 60s, but the AWA was still pretty popular in the mid 80s here. I mean, they were still rolling, but Vince was really trying to take him out with the WWF. They were in tight competition, but I would send all my tapes to Vern in the AWA. I would always, and they put me in touch with their agent, Roy Nelson. So every time I call, I'd always get Roy. And he's always tells me, always call, feel free to call anytime. Keep us posted what you're doing. We're not sure what we're going to do with you yet, but they just wanted to keep tabs on us, I think. Vern wasn't going to put us, my thinking is Vern would always bring local wrestlers on for the interviews. And I thought maybe he'll bring us on for an interview segment. That's what I was wanting to get out of it.
Yeah.
My naive thinking. But Vern wasn't going to do it because Vern always preached, don't try this at home, kids. And that's exactly what we were doing. But at the same time, though, Vern did things that told me he kind of, he admired what we were doing. Because, we had the local news do a story on us at one point. They did a story on the whole show, and they used AWA footage that they had to get permission from Vern to use, and Vern okayed it to use with our story. So, so if he okayed AWA footage to be used in the story about us, that means he's not condoning it, condemning the whole thing, right? So that those little things. Plus I used All Star Wrestling sometimes on our posters. I sent all our posters to the AWA all the time, so they know what we're doing. Because he always said, "Keep me posted," so I did. And I said, All Star Wrestling is his trademark, and he's went after other smaller indie promotions trying to use All Star Wrestling. Vern has taken to court. He didn't. He just turned a blind eye to our deal.
And he definitely seen it, like.
Oh yeah, he definitely knew that, because like I said, I sent them the posters, so they definitely got him. And I imagine he might have had people that he sent to the shows sometimes too, just undercover. Yeah, just scouting, just seeing what we're doing. But nothing ever came with Vern. But Eddie was willing to want to work with us more and train and everything. So I was just like a sponge. What Eddie would do, he'd teach us these things, and then I would take it back to our guys and kind of brush everybody else up. And that's kind of how he didn't have all of us come there to train. It was just me and Steve. But then we'd bring it back. And that's what I think that's what he wanted us to do, is what he's.
That's the learning tree right there. One person teaches you, and like the roots, you spread down the knowledge.
Exactly. Just bringing it over. Now, old school training, Johnny, totally different than what they're going through today, and in the British chain and everything.
So talk a wee bit about that for like any of the younger people might be watching.
Well,
I mean, what was different back then compared to now, even in the methods of training?
So the training in old school in general is a little more simpler. It's more of a showcase of moves and maneuvers. So like your moves are more broader. It's like the traditional moves in these days with the old school was, clotheslines, body slams, elbow drops, hip lock takedowns, arm drags, just basic moves, right?
Repetition.
And repetition. But what you didn't have is the hurricanratas and all this fancy stuff that you see now. That was not a fancy thing back in old school. Would be a flying head scissors, which I did.
Yeah, that
was like not everybody could do that, right? And if you could do that, you stood out, right? So I know it seems silly saying that now, but that's how it was, right? Not everybody was a high flyer like that, and so you had different styles in old school. You had some high flyers, you had some brawlers, you had some just technicians. You had just different kind of styles of matchups that you'd get with wrestlers. Yeah. Some people could do all of it. I could do quite a bit of everything, but not everybody could. That's what I'm trying to say. And the
head scissors one stands out. So it does. Like that was did Owen Hart do that at his very early career in WWF?
Flying head scissors.
The head scissors thing where he spun around while he was in the head scissors.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. I mean, Owen Hart's also has a really good standing drop kick. I mean, he can go, standing to get it. He's another one. But no,
sorry, I digress. Go back to what you were saying.
Oh, you were asking like what the training was like. So Eddie's training, the way he trained, he didn't have a ring to train with. He didn't use a ring to train with. He's one of these old school guys that just used wrestling mat pads in a gym, and that's what it was. And you did all your bumping and learning on these hard wrestling mat pads on hard concrete floors.
Yeah.
So and like maybe one day it would be headlock takedowns, and we'd do it over like 100 times, over and over and over and over. Just repeat. And then Eddie, the way he did, he had handlers out there, and he would just kind of sit in his chair and kind of just watch and tell us, okay, yep, you work on that more, adjust this, make sure you're hitting both feet when you land, have it in both feet, come down flat. Some guys would be 1 foot or the other foot and they weren't getting a good landing.
Yeah.
That kind of thing. He would just kind of bark the instructions. But after a while, and as he kept fine tuning us as we did this, after you did 50 of them, you have it down, and then you keep doing it and you keep doing it. So the point is, and that would be that day. And then the next time it might be another move, hip locks, or another time, you might be doing the back body drops, whatever the move was. And he would work on all the moves. And then with
making a muscle memory then.
Muscle memory, exactly. And then to get a match sequence down, you would learn from a veteran. So you would be put into the ring with somebody who already knows, and they lead the match. And then you just you follow their direction, their communication. Yeah. So that's how you learn the flow of a match. It makes sense.
On the spot.
On the spot. Yep. In a show.
That's something I'm learning. Like even like say like NIPW, I've said that to you a few ones. That's one of the things I love the most is that hour and a half, 2 hours before showtime, I like just kind of sitting back and watching everybody go about. I don't want to give too much away, but you know what I mean. Everybody in the ring going over their stuff. I love watching and listening to the psychology that goes into it.
Yeah, I mean, because and the way we did it in old school, the way Eddie taught us is you need to have rest holds. So don't just give him everything. So like he would tell us like what to expect. Like, so if you're gonna do it, might be do a series of moves and you go into a headlock and you sit there for a headlock, give him 30 seconds, 40 seconds. These are old school style matches. There's breaks and you it's called a rest hold, and you rest.
Yeah, that's for a breather.
For a breather, plus to give the crowd time to soak it in, what's all happening. If you go too fast, one time me and Troy Steenerson, this is later on in the PWA, I said, Troy, it was 1989, and I said, let's do something different here, because we're so used to this Eddie style of this slow progression of a match. I said, let's go fast paced. No one's done this. Let's go fast and let's just give it some excitement. Let's see what happens, right?
Yeah.
And so I showed Ricky this match, and he thought it looked pretty contemporary. He's surprised, to see it in 1989. Some of the things I was doing, I was doing slingshots over the top rope, which I never seen anybody do. I just figured out that's kind of cool. Let's do this, right? You're just kind of somersault over the top rope,
Yeah.
And
back then, it's brave to do that anytime. But even as you say, back then nobody was doing that, so that would have took some courage. Like,
oh yeah, I mean, and I knew we needed to do things like that to make it stand out. So that's why I figured let's try that. And then we went fast paced, and the crowd got really into it. They were, they was just really into it. They really liked the match, and we thought it was great. And I got a huge pop at the end, because I won, but I didn't because I went off the top rope. See, I'm going to tell you a funny story. In the NWF, it was legal to go off the top rope. In the PWA, they still use the rule you couldn't go off the top rope. So I went off the top rope because I'm used to it.
That blew my mind the first time I seen that rule. Was it WCCW used to have that as well? Or there was some old promotion, I remember watching that, but I had watched it whenever I was a lot older, so I was watching it back, and I'd never heard of that rule of getting disqualified for coming off the top rope.
Yeah, AWA had it like that too for a while. And then they changed it, but Eddie was still can't go off the top rope. Well, I didn't. When I first did the dual event with Eddie, I'm kind of backing up now. I went off the top rope a couple times, and their referee, Bruce Kreitzman, he goes, I was going to ring the bell on you there because that's a DQ here. It's like, that's not a DQ with us.
Did you know that at the time?
No, I didn't know that. I didn't know that.
No, you didn't.
So that was just, and Bruce, he knew the finish, so he wasn't going to do that. But he's like saying, just so you know, I was tempted to, because technically a ref will do that. They will, like, if you do something that's against the rules, and you blatantly, they would disqualify you. That's happened in matches. But not that it's just because they don't want it to look like back in the day it was integrity. Like you couldn't break the rules, right? That would be frowned upon, like blatantly like that in front of a ref. So anyway, like back in the day in the AWA, if you manhandled the ref or threw him out of the ring, that's it. They're ringing the bell. It was very.
Yeah, there's no coming back for that.
But anyways, I didn't. We used that, and when I went back to the PWA in this match, I went off the top rope, and then that will be a disqualification. But because I went off the top rope, so that's how I won it. I pinned the guy, but I got DQ'd. Anyways, the match was really good. The crowd got into it. When we got back, Eddie's like, "You guys went way too fast. What were you thinking?" He didn't yell at us, but he ridiculed us. He's like, you got to slow it down. You were just going, despite the fact that the fans loved it and everything, he was so old school. He just didn't want to see a fast-paced match. We were just a little too early.
He couldn't understand it.
And if you look at it now, it blends right in with the speed of pace of a match,
And even though he was saying that, overall, what was your vibe off him? Did you think, was he happy? Was he cross?
Oh, he wasn't. He was just saying you can't do that. Don't go. He wasn't ready for that kind of change. And he wasn't mad. He was just saying, don't
set in his ways.
Bring it down. Bring it down. Bring it back to where we were. And I told him, I said, hey, we just want to do something different. And he's like, no, keep it the way it is. Trust me. You don't. If it's not broke, don't fix it. I think is what his thing is. If it's not broke, don't fix it. But so anyways, but I look back at it now and I think, fans were ready for it. They liked it. And then
did you listen to him? Did you cut it out?
Oh yeah, we didn't do it again.
Yeah.
I mean, Eddie's look, I had a lot of respect for him. If he told me not to, I won't.
That's what I was going to say. Respect.
Yeah, I'm not gonna. If that's how he wishes it not to be, then I'll do it how he wants. But I remember telling Troy, I said, Troy, you heard the crowd. I mean, this is gonna. I told him, I said, this is what's how it's gonna go in the future. Trust me, they're gonna. Because guys like Waltman were coming in. You know, Sean Waltman was in right around that time, and
okay.
He was certainly like that. It's funny. Sean Waltman did my. There's a move I did. I'm trying to remember what it was. And Waltman. Oh, I know what I did. It wasn't the slingshot, and I did a springboarded myself off the top rope and did a somersault over my opponent. His name was Slick Stevenson. I somersaulted over his back and then ran against the other ropes and come back. And I just it's just another one I just kind of figured out at the time. This is '89, and Waltman.
So you talked about on the X-Pac then?
Yeah, Waltman seen me do it, and then all of a sudden he starts doing it. You know.
And was Waltman? What was he like back then? Like, was there any signs of that, like, high flying credentials even back then?
Well, his style was similar to mine. He looked like me at the time. His name was Sean.
He had his eyebrows though.
Well, yeah, his name was Sean. I was Sean. All the guys knew me, you know, for a couple of years as Sean in the dressing room and stuff. So when they seen him show up, they thought we were the same person at first because we kind of looked alike. It was just kind of funny. But just because of our names being Sean, they'd kind of get us confused at first when he showed up. But we didn't know. No, nobody looked at him like, oh my gosh, this is a WWE Hall of Famer here. Nobody looked at it like that. He was a small guy, just like me. A little bit bigger than me, though, but maybe 20 pounds, 25 pounds bigger, I'd say.
Okay.
Not much, but bigger. But nobody looked. Height-wise, maybe an inch taller. We were very close.
Okay.
Like I was 145, he was 165, I think, when he first came in there. So, anyways, his style was similar and stuff, but nobody seen him as like a standout, like kind of this guy's going places or anything like that. He was good, just like I was. I was good at the time too, but we were small guys. But we had the small guy factor. You know, Sean was suffering it just like I was because they didn't use big guys. So we always got we were never main event. We were always mid card with Eddie just because of our size, you know?
Yeah.
And
but even mid card with Eddie, you're going to snatch his hand off all day long for that.
Oh yeah. I mean, and the crowd at George's and Fridley where Eddie did all his big shows, the crowd there was intense. It was a really intense atmosphere. Like it was a great place to. His ring sucked. Eddie's ring is known as the hardest ring in wrestling. It had a spring, but I don't think it worked. I mean, you bounced off that mat more than the mat bounced itself.
Yeah.
And everybody will tell you that bumped in that ring. But Waltman, I'll tell you a funny story of Sean Waltman. When he first came, I think he was 17 years old. He was staying up in Duluth, Minnesota at his grandma's house up there. And we had a wrestling ring. See, Eddie didn't have one to practice in, but we did. We had our wrestling ring, our NWF ring up in Troy Stevenson, the guy, my opponent, in his pole barn. He had a big pole barn. So we had a place to practice. And Eddie would send guys to us all the time to practice. Well, Waltman, Troy's place, he has the ring there. And Waltman would keep calling Troy to want to come and practice all the time. And it bothered Troy. He's like, Waltman's keeps calling me all the time. He wants to come here and use the ring. I'm getting tired of it. Troy I don't know why, because we didn't know he's going to be a big. Look, the people would come and go all the time. Like, Waltman could have been another one that was just in for a while and out. We've seen a lot of that. Guys traveling around in the indie business back then.
And for a cup of coffee.
Right. And so, we didn't know. But anyways, so I eventually, I was supposed to have a match with Waltman too, and that never happened because I ended up I moved to Wisconsin. And I was just too far away and I couldn't make the traveling. And that's when I quit. I already left. It was too far away.
Okay.
I was like 200 miles away and it was just too hard to make the shows. But I remember Ray Webby, the matchmaker. See, Eddie promoted differently. He promoted the shows, and then he had like a guy, Ray Webby, do all the booking, matchmaking.
Yeah.
So he was the booker, and Ray is the one who always set up the matches. I remember Ray came up to me in the locker room at George's one night and goes, because I've never wrestled Waltman. He's like, how would you like to have a match with Sean Waltman at coming up? I think you guys could do a good one. And I said, yeah, I'm fine with it. I wouldn't never turn a match down, Johnny. I mean, I don't care who it is. If you want to, I go against anybody. But anyways, he goes, yeah, I think we'll do that. Wrestle for Shelter. Wrestle for Shelter was a big fundraiser he did for homeless people. Try to raise money
Okay.
and get them place. So you work for free, but it's all for charity. And so, yeah, I'll do it. And he told me I was out there ways. Well, never happened because I ended up leaving the PWA and with Eddie. Eddie and I just mutually decided this isn't the best option for me anymore. He wanted me there every time, and I could only go like every other, and it just wasn't working.
Right.
And
Okay.
so, yeah, so he just thought, unless you move back to Minnesota, I just don't see how we can make this work, So and at that time, my career and everything, I got my college degree, I was kind of going into a different direction. I still loved wrestling.
Life coming into it then.
Yeah, real life. And I still love wrestling though, and I loved every bit of it. And I was able to defend my NWF belt in the PWA when we did the dual event, which was cool.
Yeah.
So that's how we say it's the first traveling indie world championship, because I think we're the first ones to go into another indie promotion in those days, because there wasn't a lot of them.
Really?
Yeah, indie promotions in the mid 80s are few and far between. Remember, it's still the territory days still.
Oh yeah, you just got the territories, yeah.
Yeah. And so
I'd love to have seen them days. I would really love to have seen them days.
Yeah. Yeah, they were still there.
The crowd watch it differently back then as well. That's what I try to tell some of my non-wrestling friends. Like, you go back into the territory days, back into, say, even the early 80s and that, them people genuinely believed what they were watching. A lot of them ones, kayfabe was still full swing. And like, you hear Roddy Piper, you hear these people talking about getting stabbed on the way out of shows. They took it so seriously. Like, one of my bucket lists would have been, like, if I could have went anywhere, and I mentioned that already, it would have been the old Sportatorium.
Yeah, that was a hot, heavy action there.
Attention Belfast, Northern Ireland's #1 pro wrestling promotion is making its highly anticipated return to the capital city. Saturday, May 31st at the Willowfields Church Halls. An absolutely stacked card in store for everybody that afternoon, so let's take a quick rundown of the action. Coming in red hot at #1, it's the NHG Junior Heavyweight Championship as the Irish grappler John McCann steps foot in the ring with the brand new NHG Junior Heavyweight Champion in his very first defence, Jordan Nelson. Up next we have Nando Libre versus Ken Cutler. Iron Ken Cutler is operating on a whole different level these days and is becoming a must-see star here in NIPW. He's looking to continue the form of his career. However, waiting for him is a refocused and determined Nando Libre looking to get himself back into the winning boots. Up next is a match with 40 years of history and prestige. The NWF World Heavyweight Championship, a title that has identified the very best young talent, and that's exactly what you're going to get as the Canary Kid goes one-on-one with Ben Nelson in the final match of a best for three. To ensure that's called down the middle, the man in charge of the action, the founder of the NWF and former multiple-time champion, none other than Crusher Crossen. Coming in next is four of the hardest hitting, trash talking, in your face competitors the North has to offer. Northwest versus Pure Filth. We never thought we would see Pure Filth side by side ever again. They're reunited, refocused and ready to go to war one more time. But this time, a Viking and a Cowboy awaits them. And that Viking and Cowboy have laid to waste every team they have met so far. And then your main event of the night, a singles match for the NIPW Resolution Heavyweight Championship. As the #1 contender, undefeated King of the North, Damien Corvin steps foot in the ring with the undefeated NIPW Resolution Heavyweight Champion, Callum Black. Book your tickets now to assure your place in Northern Ireland #1 pro wrestling promotion.
Yeah, I was going to tell you my first, with us, we didn't know it was called kayfabe, but we did our own version of it because, like, when we were doing work matches, my biggest fear, we'd have kids because we had an open door policy. Any kids that wanted to join our show, they could come in and they could do it. I wanted that opportunity that I wanted for everybody, any kid. Mm-hmm. So if you're in the age range, you can do this. And a lot of times, though, kids come and they do it and they realize this ain't for me. It's too hard. It's too rough, whatever, and they're gone. And at first, we were kind of trying to show them how we're doing things, at least with how we were teaching ourselves how to do things. And then we realized some of these kids, we don't have a vested interest here. Do we trust them? And they're going to go tell everybody at school and then they're going to say what we're doing. My fear was that the kids at school would know it's all planned and faked, and then they would not tune in anymore. That was my thinking.
Yeah.
Or they think we're a joke. So I'm like, so now when they come in, as we get new kids, don't not tell them anything. They're just going to get in the ring, and we're going to see if they can handle it. And then if they can or they can't, and if they keep coming back, then eventually we'll smarten them up. That's how I did it, right or wrong. And
but was that not the given way back then? But
it was, though. Like I found that out later. But yeah, when you were training, they wouldn't tell you anything either right away. Like if you went to Burns camp, you would just be rough. It'd be rough going until you got through
more or less just try to break you to see if you come back the next day.
Exactly. And so we were kind of doing the same thing, but and then we had our shoot title matches in those days, which was basically wasn't predetermined. Our title matches, you actually had to win or submit. They really became submission matches because, John, if you're really trying to wrestle for real and you try to pin somebody for a legitimate 3 count, it's not easy. Yeah. Very difficult.
Right, well, I want to pick your brain about that. And again, for anybody that might not know, talk about a shoot. And I find that fascinating that you brought shoot matches into this. So a shoot basically is you're going for real.
Right. It's with our shoots, it was the only reason I did is because I was getting so much heat from the other kids that I wasn't being fair. And I said, all right, fine. You don't like the way I'm deciding it? We're going to decide it in the ring. So if you win by a pin or you submit, that's how you're going to win. I'm not going to decide anymore. So there was /work/shoots. You'd start out kind of working a little bit, but you had a 10-minute time limit. And generally these matches always went the same way. After a few minutes of that, then you start trying to grapple and really win. And
yeah.
And then you get this intense wrestling match, which our NWF fans love watching that stuff. They really like seeing the competitive part of that. I look at it and think this isn't pro wrestling, but I guess it can be entertaining in a way, but it's not pro wrestling. Yeah. And some of these shoots were just they weren't even good shoots because they were just headlock on headlock, trying to get the advantage, and really not doing
kids fighting.
Yeah, just kids fighting.
Yeah.
And but
what about the parents now during that? Did you smarten them up to any of that, or
no? We didn't tell them. And I'll tell you, some of these shoots got out of hand. And
yeah, that's what. Can I pick your brain about that?
I was in one of them. What happened was. So like I said, you try to get submissions because submissions was much easier to make somebody to give up than pin them. So you try to do submissions. But you have to think ahead. So when I'm going to shoot, like I'm thinking, okay, if he gets me in this move, how am I going to get out of it? Because I'm not. In our day, Johnny, the worst thing you would do, even when you're just friendly grappling, you don't want to give up. You don't submit. I'd rather you pin me than not submit. I'm not giving up. So it's a pride thing. I'm like, I'm not, so you're not going to give up. So if you get in the submission hold, how do you get out of it? So there was a lot of that. You had to kind of figure it out. Like I'll give you an example. Like if somebody gets me into a Boston Crab, the only way out is to press out of it. So if somebody gets me in that, if I can't push out of it or I can't get the ropes, it's one or the other. I'm not going to get out of it. So, and I've done it a couple times where you have to push your way out of it. And it hurts when you do it, but you can get out of it if they're, it depends how much they're synced in. The other move that people did a lot was full Nelsons. If you crank a full Nelson, you're going to eventually, that's going to hurt.
I've never trained in my life, but I've ignored the do not try this at home warning a few times, and I remember I've been a couple of times where old friends put me into like a full Nelson, and whenever you feel the 2 shoulder blades crunching I'd never forget that. That's brutal.
And Ace used to do a reverse full Nelson, which I've never seen, where he does it backwards, and he has your back of your neck and your stomach, and he pulls up like this and get all that pressure on your neck. The other one was
limiting your breathing as well.
The more common one, I think, though, was like the surfboard, which is like a camel clutch. Only it's not. You don't do the arms over the knees. You just on their back and you just pull the neck up. It's like a surf. Look how surfers are waiting for waves. They sit on the surfboard and they hold the top of their board. That's how the move got its name. And the reason they did
is that I know the other one's the Mexican surfboard. I haven't seen that used. Is that what you call it? The Mexican surfboard, where you're on their back and then you roll back and you kind of have them upside down?
No, that's different. That's a whole different move. So the surfboard is just you're laying on your stomach like a camel clutch, and the guy's just sitting on your back, pulling your neck up. That's it. Not worrying about your arms.
Okay.
Doesn't worry about your arms, because here's the thing. If somebody gets in my back and they start grabbing my arms, I know what they're doing. I'm just going to go like this. If you're really wrestling, you're not going to give them your arms. So the surfboard was much easier to get into. But there's
Right,
you know,
okay.
to get out of the surfboard, you have to press out of it. Then you give your back up. There's just so many. So that's what I'm saying, John. You got to think when you got two guys that know how to do moves, you got to really be thinking ahead. It's almost like a chess game.
So then I have to ask as well, whenever you're saying about doing these moves and learning these moves, so back then, were you learning your disciplines as well as learning pro wrestling? Like, were you any what would now be MMA? Was there any of that in your game training, or?
No, we didn't really. MMA didn't exist, so there was no tapping.
Yeah.
We didn't know
No,
that.
but I mean, like, did you learn any other disciplines outside of pro wrestling?
Well, I did. I know I learned some karate, but we didn't really use it. And you couldn't strike. You can't strike, so it can't do like UFC striking or anything like that. I use pressure points a lot to try to get submissions. You know, pressure points are a good way to make somebody give up. You know, whether it's the armpit ones, there's all sorts. Yeah, all sorts of
there.
Yep. But no, I mean, here's what happened. This is why we got away from shoots, because I had two things happen. One, in our lightweight title match, the Dynamite dude, his name was, he was a tough little kid. He could hold his own against kids 2-3 years older than him. He's just a tough, scrappy kid, but he was a nice kid. But he got his opponent in a camel clutch. He actually got the arms. He actually got it. But he was pulling back. He's pulling back so hard that Ryan, when he had it, he couldn't breathe. So, and his arms, there was no tapping. You have to say, the ref asks you, do you give up? And you have to either nod or say yes. Well, he can't nod. He's kind of like in this position. Well, finally, he got out of it, and he was just in tears because he was scared. He wasn't hurt. He was just scared because he couldn't breathe. And I remember Adam. We stopped the match, stopped the camera. Adam was apologizing to him. You know, like, I'm sorry, Ryan. I didn't mean to. You know, because he so shook up over this. And Adam, he stopped wrestling after that. He didn't want to do it anymore. That scared him.
Yeah.
So and then that happened, and then I had a really bad match with my best friend, just like Ricky and Ben are kind of in a situation. Mentor, best friend. I had the same thing, and I put the belt first. I told Matt, I said, Matt, you know, when the bell rings, I'm coming after that belt, and I don't want there to be any hard feelings when we're done. He's like, I understand.
Was there any hard feelings when you were done?
Oh yeah, there certainly was, because that match got ugly as hell. I just put a leg scissors on him, tried to make him give up. He wouldn't. He's clawing at me. I had put him in a wrist lock and the leg scissors, and I just cranked, and he wouldn't give up. And everybody's cheering me on to win. It was like and he was in pain, like, because my legs were hurting. I don't know. He had to be hurting, and it didn't.
Even with the adrenaline.
Oh yeah, and then finally I had him wore out enough where I was able to pin him because he was so spent. And when I pinned him and everything, and then here's the thing, Johnny, when the adrenaline settles down, like, you're in the heat of the moment in the match like that, and I got the belt, and I was so happy that I got it. But then when that adrenaline settled down, I realized what I did. I tried to call him up to apologize. Matt didn't talk to me for 6 weeks after that match. He was, well, think about it. He was embarrassed in front of everybody in this whole thing, and everybody.
That's what I was going to ask. Did he take it personal, or was it just a matter of give him a couple of weeks to let his pride heal?
At that age, 14, 15, 16.
Yeah,
that's definitely going to hurt your, emotions. There's just no way. But what Matt did, though, he did come out in the middle of my interview after a couple months, and I had an interview with the belt. It was my first interview, I think, at the time, and he came out and interrupted it and said, I just want to shake your hand and congratulate you on winning the belt and wish you luck on your title reign. And then we were friends again, and I could never do with that. I could never do that. If I did that, if it was the other way around, I wouldn't have went out and did that, what Matt did. To have
was that not planned then?
No, he didn't tell me he was going to do that. So I thought, man, that took a lot of, that's a class act. I could never do that though. And he did. But our friendship was never the same. Part of it got destroyed. So that's when I said, Johnny, we're not doing this anymore. This isn't the way it's done anyway. What are we doing? So we're going to start doing this the right way. If we're going to, and then eventually go to the Inoka Armory, we're going to do everything proper. We're not going to do shoots. So
do you have before you move on there, have you any regrets about doing the shoots, or?
Well, there's a couple good things that came out of it. It toughened everybody up. Like, because in the old school days, there was this, you had to be certain toughness. If you weren't, you couldn't do it. There was no crying room if you got, bumps and bruises. like, I think of today now, kids that they bump their elbows and they're hurt and everything, right? And I mean, no, I mean, we got bumps and bruises all the time, but it was just part of the regular thing. So doing shoots really got you ready for that kind of thing.
If you didn't have bumps and bruises, you weren't learning.
Yeah, I mean, you have to be physical enough, and so especially when we started getting into doing proper bumping, then you really needed to be, and just like the old school guys, there's some guys in old school that just can't bump. Like Jesse Ventura can talk really good, but he can't bump for nothing. We had guys in our deal too, and that was an old school thing. You had guys that could bump, and you had guys that couldn't bump that well. And nowadays, everybody can bump, right?
Yeah, well.
So it's how it's evolved. That's why I always say Ricky, Ben, they got it great because they're learning everything properly. They all can perform properly. It wasn't like that in the old school days.
Well, Ricky and Ben, you're talking about Ricky and Ben. I get the feeling that we're going to get on to, should I say, Canary Kid and Ben, and just a little bit. I want to pick your brain just a little bit more about back then, the NWF. So you finished off with where am I getting stuck here? Finished off with the shits. Sorry, made one blank. You finished off with the shits. No overall real regrets. What was the next step in the journey?
Then we started doing so the cable shows evolved through all this time too. Like when I first started the cable show, we were just in our local communities. Then I spread it out to the whole metro, several cable companies. Then I got to thinking, well, why not go across the country with it? So I started setting time slots up in all the major states, with the major cities. And I had to do it
Can you go into detail about that a wee bit? Because I find that fascinating. The difference between is it syndicated and then just showing it locally, and how the expansion
I can tell you some stories with that. So so they didn't have residency requirements then. So you could get your show on in any state. You didn't have to live in the area. Now they have residency requirements, so you can't. It's harder to do, but meaning you have to live there in that area. So what I would do then is I would call. This was back in the rotary phone days, and I would call up long distance to all these cable companies. I'd get the number. I'd figure out how to get a hold of them by calling. You have information. You can get the number, and then I'd find out the cable companies' numbers and all these cities, and I call up and I would say I have a program, I'm producing it, I'd like to have it aired in a time slot. Can we get a weekly time slot? And they said, yeah. They give us a time slot, and then I'd say, okay, I'm going to be sending you tapes in the mail, and then I'll have return postage. I used Media Rate because it was cheap, and then I just dubbed my tapes. That was the time consuming thing, was dubbing a show. I'd have to dub like 20 copies to get them to go all out. But
what do you mean by dub? What do you mean by dub?
Okay, this is VHS tape days, so I'd have to, we'd have our master, then we'd have to make a duplicate and a duplicate. And just start making all the copies of the shows, and it was just time consuming. So we'd duplicate the tapes, and then I would send it, but I would send it to one station, have them forward it to another city, have them forward it, and then back to me. So I'd usually hit up 2 or 3 cities with a round, of circulation.
And do you pay them for this, or?
I paid the shipping to get it to them, and then they would pay it back. We just use Media Rate.
I mean, you don't pay them for actually showing the content.
Oh no. It's community television, so they would let us have it. We just get a time slot, and then they go on there. We couldn't advertise either, so that was the trade-off. Think of it kind of like public television, kind of like for the communities.
Yeah,
that's what it was. But it was very highly watched in these days. Like nowadays, it's lost with satellite and everything else. But in these days, you only had 40 channels, and one of them was this, and people would channel surf and click through, and then a lot of times they'd come on to you. So, and I know this because we have our NWF hotline, and I used to put the area code. I used to always have the area code and the number. All of a sudden, I'm getting calls from New York and different areas that are way far away with kids saying, "Hey, I want to join. How can I get on?" I said, "We're." I could tell the accent was different. I'm like, where are you from? And they're like, well, we're from Buffalo, New York, or whatever. I'm like, yeah, you have to travel about 2,000 or 3,000 miles to get here, unless you can get to Minnesota. This is where we're doing it. And then I got to thinking, well, I got to thinking that, maybe I shouldn't put the area code. If I can get rid of the area code, they won't know where to call. So we got rid of the area code. But but that was just, I was just doing that number to get local people, to come on and join us. I wasn't intending to get all the people from the other cities, but that, we circulated the tape national. That's when we changed the name to NWF, when we were going national with it. We call it national. It was about 22 states.
Was that a big decision for you to rename it, or well, you said it had been renamed a couple of times at that time, had it?
Oh yeah, we renamed it a few times. I mean, when we went all over the metro, we called ourselves the Twin Cities Wrestling Association. But then I just said the name's got to represent what we're doing. If we're going to go out nationwide, let's make it NWF. Nobody was using NWF at the time, National Wrestling Federation. So I went ahead and we just started using it. And it's a funny story, I'll tell you about that too, because years later, somebody trademarked NWF after we started using it and gave me a cease and desist saying, you can't use this anymore. This is our trademark. And
you used it first, but you hadn't trademarked it.
Right. But I looked into it, and it turns out when you use it first and you still, and you can prove it, and I had newspaper articles and stuff, Johnny, I could prove it. You can overturn their trademark. So I caught a hold of mine. I just said, look, I don't have a problem with you using this. I'm going to keep using it. We're two different products here. Nobody's going to be confused, because I was promoting like the teen stuff we did and the kid stuff at the time. And I said, so if you want to, you go ahead and do what you want. But I said, we can get this overturned. And I said, I have a fleet of lawyers that'll work on it. I didn't, but I said that. And he never came. He just let it go. Yeah, he let it go. We never heard from him again. Because I could. And I showed him. I said, look, here's an article. You can see the date. This is when we were using it. And he knew that he probably looked into it and realized that we could overturn it.
It's not worth it.
Yeah. So that took care of that. So, but no, I was going to tell you though, we were talking about where it went from there. Well, in 86, after we did that first armory and had that success, we kept doing more Anoka armories, more big live venues. And we eventually sold out the Anoka armory with over 450 fans. That was our biggest achievement.
Brilliant.
Yeah. And it was a
great, some atmosphere.
Oh yeah. It was, all them people to be tightly around the ring like that and this big crowd. And it was quite an accomplishment. We made a lot of money.
What did you prefer, if I can ask? So, like, as a wrestler, did you prefer like a bigger venue with like a bit of space between the ring and ringside, or do you like a close? I love a venue like the dojo, really close. Oh, yeah. The fans are breathing on you. You know what I mean? Like you can feel everybody in the audience.
The Snake Pit is a nickname for Eddie Sharkey's. George's and Fridley, they call it the Snake Pit or Ropers. But that had that tight crowd. Like you had maybe a couple feet, maybe.
Yeah.
For the people who were sitting. And I remember me and Ricky were just watching the match on our last forward show, because I wanted to show how I could get my restoration. I got new restoration software. I wanted to show them how it looked. But when I left the ring, I kind of sprung over the top rope and landed on the floor, on my feet. And I thought, gosh, I don't know why I did that, because I almost landed in the front row when I did that, that's how tight it was. But yeah,
that's what the dojo was like.
I was just trying to look fancy leaving the ring, I thought. But then when I did it, I thought, oh boy, I'm gonna go on somebody's lap here.
You regretted it.
Yeah. But I've been in other ones too. I did Irondale High School, where the ring was out in the gym floor, and we had all this space. I mean, they actually had like the wrestling mat pads going around the ring. So we actually had padding around the ring for the first time. We never had that before. And that kind of setting was kind of cool. It was a big crowd. That was my biggest crowd, about 700 people there. So that was cool to be in front of that many people. So I know both are cool, Johnny. I mean, I like both situations.
Yeah.
But if I'm in a thing where it's more spread out, it's more fun to have a big crowd then, so that you can hear all the reaction.
That was one that got me off guard. Was like I'd say I've done roughly around maybe 80, 90 shows now. No, a lot more than that. But anyway, I've done them venues, the big halls. I've done that, like the sports halls. Like Letterkenny was one of the ones we'd have done regularly around here. And then you would have had as well, up North Coast would have been a lot more tight knit as well. But whenever we done Malone, it was the first time I experienced this here, and it really caught me off guard. Where I walked out the curtain, and then we had fans sitting here in front of the entrance, looking that way towards the ring, and every one of them was just kind of turned around like that. And I never had that visual before, and I was like, I'd step out, I was like, oh, and it just took me completely off guard.
Well, speaking of taking off guard, I'll tell you too, when we did our first event, that was the first time we were in front of real fans. Like everything up to that point, it was here's how we do our TV tapings. We're always just doing TV tapings up to that first live show. So a TV taping went, whoever's wrestling, you'd have somebody reffing, you'd have one or two guys announcing, somebody's on camera. Yeah. Everybody else is the crowd, like the studio audience. So if you're not wrestling, that's your job. You're the crowd. And so we never had a real crowd until we did this armory. That was real legitimate fans and everything. And that was like so exciting to go out there. But here's the thing that caught me off guard. Now I was obviously the poster child for the show. I've been on it from the day one on every show. And these people that were here probably had been watching the show for a couple of years, watching us grow into what we are.
Yeah.
So when I left the ring after my match, and it wasn't a great match, but it wasn't bad either. It was good. It was a strap match, and the boy Steve, that's a whole other story. The straps he got for us were little thin leather strips, and they hurt like a bitch. I don't know what he was thinking. Does he want a big?
Can I ask you a question there, completely unrelated? So I can't remember what I was watching. Where there was a strap match happening in WWE there a while back, and well, it's been the last few that they've done. So you've been in a strap match and the reason I ask this is because I'm aware it's very easy for me to say this, but I've noticed these days the straps are like, you can see clearly that ain't hurting them the minute they hit them. You can literally see the sponge padding on them. Whereas if you go back to even like during the 90s, you watch the strap matches then, you can hear the slap of it. What would you like? Is that easy for me to say that the harder ones are better looking to take?
Yeah, the wider ones are easier to take. If the wider, the better actually. When the ones Steve got for us were thin little leather straps, like maybe just a centimeter, like a whip. And so when you whip, we had all these red lines all over us when we were done. But anyways, I was going to tell you that when I left the ring for this match, this is the first time I was in front of a crowd, and all of a sudden, all these little kids, like I want to say 9, 10, 11-year-olds, just come up to me we had program guys. They had pens and programs. They wanted my autograph, and I never even thought that would be a thing. And all of a sudden, I got a whole crowd around me, and they didn't do it for anybody else. And Dave, my Dixie Dave, my guy, goes, well, you got to remember, Crusher, you were the one that was on every show. You were the poster child, right? So that's probably what it is. And
they've been on the journey with you.
Right. So it wasn't adults, but it was little kids, and they all wanted the autograph. So I thought that was so cool. I mean, that was when you have little kids that are looking up to you, thinking you're some kind of hero on this really small show that I was doing at the time. I mean, that just made you feel so like $1 million. And I can't tell you the feeling to know that the kid thinks you're a hero, and he wants an autograph. That was pretty cool stuff.
And it shows you the innocence with them as well, because I would see that with the wrestlers, like in the shows over here. And even if it's like, say, a show with 40, 50 people, or even if it's up to ones with 200 people, them kids, like, as you say, they do, like, we see them, we work with these people, we see them as normal, everyday people that's fulfilling their dream. But whenever you start seeing it from the young fans' perspective, where, like, there's 2 kids at NIPW, and like every show without fear, you can see the excitement. It's like, is Stevie there? Is Stevie Fee there? Can you go and see if Stevie will talk to me? And it's just, to me, that must be make it worth everything just to have that experience alone.
Oh yeah, I mean, just to know you moved to some kid like that. And I had kids till the very end that would always come up to just to they want it's usually an autograph, or they want to shake your hand, one or the other. There wasn't a lot of, can I get your picture? Because in these days we didn't have cell phones to take pictures. Yeah, we didn't have a lot of that. But so there's a lot of either autographs or shaking hands. And I don't think I can. It seems like every time I had a match, I had somebody come up to me. I remember the second Armory show we did after that first one with the finally the real ring. We didn't. this is how you learn from your mistakes, Johnny. I did the first show. I still didn't meet Eddie yet. And we're already doing our second show. And I figured everybody that came to the first show, they're just going to come back to the second show. So we don't have to do the posters. We don't have to do everything we were doing, because we really worked hard on the first one. Yeah. And all we got was like 50 people that showed up, which at the time wasn't bad for an indie. You know, if even a 50-person crowd's not bad, but I was disappointed. Like, we just had 300 and some people. What the hell happened here? You know? And so I was kind of bummed out. And this was the night where I went out with, Steve, Mr. X. We were going to do a Broadway, a long match. Mm-hmm. And I've never done one, and he hasn't either. And we didn't do it right. We didn't do enough rest holds. We didn't blow up, but man, were we tired. And like after.
Yeah. So was the Broadway 60 minutes back then, or was?
Yeah, always fudge it. It's never exactly 60. I think we went about 50. Okay. About 50 that we went. We said it was 60. But, yeah. But anyways, when I was done, I was spent. So I went and I gave him everything, but I was still bummed. Me and Steve gave him everything in that match, and it was a good move, match for showing moves and stuff, right? We really gave him a good display. But when I was done, I ran the concession stand because I learned on the first one. I had Blaine's John's Lions complete concessions, and I seen how much money they made. And I thought, we're doing our own now. So I did our concessions at this one. So I just went up there. I said, I need a Coke. We didn't have bottled water in these days. I was thirsty and slammed one. I think I slammed 3 sodas in a row. I was so dehydrated. And that's the last thing I should be drinking. But I didn't know. I just was thirsty. And some guy came up in his 30s to me, and he wanted to shake my hand. And he goes, I just wanted to let you know that was just one of the best matches I had ever seen in a long time. And he shook my hand. I thought to myself, well, first of all, he was just being nice, because that couldn't have been the best match he ever seen, I'm thinking. But I thought at least he got his money's worth. And that made me feel good about this small crowd. So I thought, if he got his money's worth, then it was worth it, right? For the people that showed up. So, and then that's how
Did you think maybe that, so there was 50 people there, you just went 50 minutes, were you just maybe a wee bit annoyed that, like, did you maybe feel that match deserved to have more eyes on it?
I wished it would have. I mean, obviously we taped it, so we have it on video for, cable and everything, but I don't know. I was just kind of disappointed that I just felt, there were reasons. I mean, Scott Tronson, we had a guy at the cable company. We had one guy there that didn't like us, and he was always trying to find ways to interfere with us. And he was trying to claim we were advertising by promoting the Armory shows. And so he got us suspended leading up to this card. So we didn't have our cable show either to advertise this thing, because he got us off the air for a month. I had to go to the cable commission in Anoka to get him overturned, and I did. Terry
Any idea why he had a hump with you, or?
Well, I told Terry, I said, Terry, he says we're advertising. Terry O'Connell's the cable commissioner. And I said, he says we're advertising, but all we're doing is promoting ourselves, and we're nonprofit because nobody made money. All the money went back into the organization. That's how I did it, with us. Mm-hmm. When it was kids. So I said, so we're he said we're advertising, but look at these churches and everything. They come on here and do their stuff, and they're doing the same thing. And so he said, let me look into it. So he looked into it, and he's like, calls me back an hour later, goes, I'm going to overturn this. You can go back and start doing it. But he goes, don't mention ticket prices. That's the only thing. Just don't mention the ticket prices. I said, okay. And boy, this Scott Tronson, this guy, he was pissed that we got it overturned, but that's his boss. You had to listen to him.
You doing them dirty there.
I mean, you got to say you have to find ways to get around things. That's what I was trying to say. Everybody, this was not an easy thing. I had roadblocks like that all the time behind the scenes. Insurance companies saying they're going to cancel the insurance policy on our house when we were doing it in the garage or the property. Mm-hmm. I've had the school wouldn't let us go into. They had a boxing ring at the school. They wouldn't let us use it. I had to go over that guy's head to his boss, and then he gave us permission. And I kind of learned, though, I was upsetting. If you upset somebody by going to their boss, they're not going to think too highly of you. You kind of live and learn.
But you have to do what you have to do. Like, that's one thing I've noticed as well. Like, I've the two Stevens and then Nathan, the promoters that I would do work for, and like that's what the amount of like different hurdles, as you say, that come up, like things that you can be as prepared as you want, but these things that come up that you don't even think of.
Exactly. And then eventually we would start getting more adults in, and we started turning into more of an indie fed like Eddie Sharkey. And so we'd work together with Eddie a lot. And I still was promoting and running it. And it was kind of awkward, Johnny, because I'm 16, 17 now, but I have people twice my age that have to listen to me. And that didn't always go over smoothly.
So was it your decision to go more indie?
Yeah, because I was getting older. And I'm like, we can't be kids. If I'm going to
you
grow
have to
into
evolve
an adult,
with it.
we have to grow with it, you know. So I wasn't, you know, in fact, there was a time when I hated the phrase kids pro wrestling. We used to call ourselves that. And I said, we're going to ditch kids. We're just going to be NWF wrestling. Especially after meeting Eddie Sharkey and getting proper training and everything. So we're going to transition now to becoming more of an indie fed. And that's what we did. And eventually we became more of an indie fed. And I sold my ring off, though, to Ernie Ellis, who still does it to this day, still promoting. And he took over the promotion side of the NWF, but I remained in charge of the cable side of it. So I took care of our TV show, the cable show.
Okay.
And he did the promoting. It was kind of a joint venture. And then we kept promoting from there, and we kept doing like things at the dry, just different local small venues and stuff. It was good, but it was a mix. It was a mix of teens and just like you have today, kind of. It was a mix of teens and adults. It was very much like that. And but still, though, here's the thing. This is the reality of it. I couldn't really go any further than Eddie Sharkey. Like Eddie believed in me and he liked me, but if I tried to get work with Jim Mitchell, the other promoter, or other guys, they'd always say the same thing. Like, you know, you're not quite big enough. You need to be, if you had 50 or 60 more pounds, a little bit more muscle. Because I was 5'8" and 145.
Yeah.
And I just wasn't big enough. And nobody broke in at a small guy yet. So this wasn't happening. So I couldn't really, there were no avenues for me like they are today.
But it shows you, like, that speaks volumes for the levels of discrimination, for lack of a better word, against smaller wrestlers back then, is that you can go to another promotion and have somebody with the clout of Eddie Sharkey behind you, and you're still not getting that opportunity because you're too small. That must beat around the bush, piss you the hell off.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it was frustrating. That's another reason why I decided, okay, I'm going to go get a college here. I'm going in a different direction because I don't know if there's a future here. You know, and I didn't want to be an announcer or a ref or something like that. I wanted to, you know, my passion, my love was in the ring wrestling. That's what I love more than anything. And then second to that, promoting. Loved the promoting of it, running it, you know.
What did you love? What was your, like, if you had to pinpoint one thing that you hang your hat on that you loved most about promoting, what would it have been?
Just the reward of having a successful show, of having, when we sold out the Armory, for example, knowing that everything we did worked, the gratification you get. Nathan will tell you this. When you have something that works, when you put all your elbow and grease and everything into it, and you get that payoff of all these people shut up, that's the fuel to do the next one and the next one and the next one. So that's really what it is for me. That's what I loved about promoting. Learning from your mistakes as well. I always tell everybody, you know, you're going to learn. This idea of you're going to come into it and be perfect is a nice thought, but the way it works is you're going to fall flat on your face with whatever you're doing, learn what you did wrong and not do it again. And then, you know, I tell Keaton that all the time when he's for his training. You got to take the risk. You got to take the chance to maybe mess up. Don't try to be perfect out of the gate. You're going to make mistakes, but that's how you're going to learn from them. So
see, that's I admire that as well, because, like, I think that's something that no matter what discipline or sport that you're in, you need that sort of attitude as well. You need to be able to learn from your mistakes and be able to take critique as well. Like I was actually saying to Nathan there, or not Nathan, to Mitch, I think it was after the last show, is a great job. All that is like, just stand a wee bit more still whenever you're announcing. He's absolutely right. And I was actually messaged him yesterday morning, and I was like, if he's got in my ear again, the wee earpiece at this show, I was like, every single time I set foot in that ring, remind me, stand, because it's an anxiety thing. I don't even know I'm doing it. We'll be sitting there kind of waving around a wee bit. So if he's, there's ones that would take that to offense, but I like it. I would like the thought of him in my ear, Johnny, you're moving. That's how you learn.
The way I always did constructive criticism was I always started out with, I never started out with what I wanted to correct it. I'd say, like, if I was going to come and approach you like, I would do it like this. Just I was giving an example in that situation. I'd say, you know, Johnny, you're doing great. I mean, the voice, everything coming off, it's really sounding good. The only thing you want to came in work on is just a little bit of that swaying. Don't do so much of the swaying, but otherwise everything else is good. You got to, I start with reinforcement, I end with reinforcement. My correction's in the middle. That's how I always approached any kind of constructive criticism I'd ever give anybody. And that was at an early age. That's why everybody, I was really well liked by everybody because they would come to me. But at the same time, I had disciplines. Like, our biggest problem wasn't like arguing finishes or anything like that. Our biggest problem was some of the kids would be fighting with each other off camera, just light, not fist fights, but, just getting into it or causing trouble. And I would issue suspensions on these. If this kind of stuff happened, they'd be suspended off the next big show. And they didn't like that. And
it was like whenever you say they're getting at each other, but like backstage, I take it that's in a bad way, because sometimes that, like, healthy competition, like fierce competition, can be healthy competition.
Well, no,
and shows the passion. But
this was usually just a couple kids that had trouble getting along with other kids. There's only just a few of them that were the troublemakers, and I'd have to suspend them. They were good. They were great characters. They were great heels, but I'd have to suspend them. And then once I did that a couple times, everybody would stay in line. Like, it didn't take much of that. That kind of traveled around it because everybody wanted to be on the big shows. So if you
actually, the example,
yeah, you gotta have a little discipline. But otherwise, I got along with everybody. I always did. But if you mess up or you screw up, you will be suspended. And we use that in the storylines. We'd say, "Yep, Ice Dragon is suspended. He's not going to be on the show here for such and such," and we would build it into the storyline. But it was a real suspension.
Yeah. But then that's what made the best stories.
Yeah.
Them elements of realism. So let's take on then, you had said that's where you're at now. So the belt's coming back this weekend. We've talked about your journey so far. When did that start to sort of come to an end? When did you realize
you mean
maybe it's time to stop?
For the NWF?
Yeah.
So when I sold the league to Ernie and let him start running it, he changed it. He kept it NWF, but he changed it to Northern Wrestling Federation. And at that point, my feeling was the NWF then is stopped. And so that's where the NWF kind of stopped its tracks right at that point. That was in 1988.
Did the belt stop then as well?
The belt kept going. The belt kept going, but it was under a different kind of moniker. It was Northern, and then the name would change again to NCWA, and it kept changing. So that's where like the NWF's heritage for me ends when I kind of pass the torch. And then I kept wrestling a little bit, but then I stopped. It was mainly 20 years later after I stopped wrestling altogether that I looked back and said, "Gosh, what we did was pretty unique."
Yeah, you don't realize at the time what you're doing.
Didn't realize it at the time, but as we look back, and I have all the newspaper articles and there were several papers that did stories. Honestly, I kept all that, and I had all this thing. I thought, gosh, I want to tell the story. So that's where I produced a documentary and I wrote a book about everything we did because I thought it was pretty unique. It was way before backyard wrestling, which some people would consider us because we were untrained, right, in the beginning. So, but we weren't crazy like they are. We were trying to do it right. We were trying to do it as good as we can to the way.
If you're getting endorsed by Eddie Sharkey, you're not backyard wrestling.
Right. I mean, some people call backyard untrained, and I get that. If you're untrained, your backyarders are untrained. That's kind of part of the terminology. But eventually we did get training. But anyways, but yeah, so I wrote the book and I wrote the documentary, and that's when I kind of resurfaced with my story with it again. But the reason the NWF belt, we thought, let's bring it back into the fold. It's 40 years, and it was a really significant title at the time because it was showing the cutting edge of the time period. You didn't see teenagers doing this stuff, and here we are, and we have a title, and we're teens, and we're and not just teens. Eventually adults too.
We might as well just get into that then. So, how did this come about? Not only bringing the title back for this match, but how did your involvement come to be, and what led to this match happening in NIPW?
So the way it started was Dixie Dave, who's one of our wrestlers back in the day, and me. Dave said to me, he goes, we should do a podcast for Rewind. We'll call it, like NWF Rewind. We'll look back at our old stuff. I have fun, tell the stories, tell all the backstories, So we'll show the footage because people like to see it, but then we'll be talking over it with all the stories and everything that was happening at the time. And that's what we did. Watch along. Yep. And we did those, and we did that for a few years. And then I started, people that were watching were saying, hey, you should check out this guy in Europe, Subforce Arnie. He's a 9-year-old doing just like you guys. So I thought, that's interesting. So I looked into this, and I eventually came across Canary Kid as well. But as I looked, because once I found Subforce, I started looking for others, and I found Canary Kid. And I thought, when I seen Canary, I thought, gosh, with Canary Kid, I could see the charisma and the passion. When you had it back in the day, like I did, I can see it. Like I can watch a match and I say that kid's got passion, or he's got passion. You can see it. It's something you can see because you know what you're looking for. It wasn't even physical. What's that?
I know exactly what you're saying there. I got tickets to, I think it was Scrapper Mania, one of the OTT shows down in Dublin. And I think it was was it maybe the first one after COVID, or was it one before COVID? Whatever. And I had asked into the wrestling forum if anybody was going down, maybe do a car share. And that's where I had first met Ricky and John and La Flama, Phoenix La Flama as well. It used to be an NXG. So that's where I met them three. And as I say, I think John and Ricky had maybe done 2-3 training sessions at this time.
Yeah.
But you could tell straight away from both of them that they were all in.
Oh, they were. And so how I got to meet these guys was like this. So Subforce was my first. I said, Dave, I'm going to bring him on because he's doing what we did today at a much more higher level than we were. They're better. They're trained right out of the gate. This is, they're in England. Subforce Arnie's in England. So I brought him on. He had to wake up at 2 a.m. and everything. He's a little kid, and he was nervous, but he did really well, and it was a great interview. And we showed some of his matches. He's doing crazy, doing superplexes. I mean, it's crazy. He's really advanced, and he was good. And then when we did him, and then I did Keaton. I found Keaton. I said, Keaton, I'd like to have you come on because you're training. I found Wrestling Revolution Keaton, so I brought him in.
You found Ricky before Keaton.
I found Ricky first, but then I found Keaton. But then Keaton, I then realized knew of Ricky because Ricky commented on the show I did with Keaton saying, thanks for using my match footage. And so then I thought, well, I want to start and I said, Dave, I'm going to start a whole new podcast. We'll call it NWF Forward for all the people getting started in the business. We're Rewind. This will be Forward. It's all in the talking of VHS tapes, Rewind, Fast Forward. That's how we get these names. So anyways, so I asked Ricky, I said, Ricky, you want to come on? And I'm going to start a new show called Forward. Would you like to come on as a guest? And he's like, yeah, sure. Absolutely. So, and that's where he and I hit it off as friends. We talked so much after that. I think we are on after the show went off, and I really learned a lot about him from that first interview. He was very, if you see the Ricky Henry Canary Kid first interview as a guest, he was very humble, very polite, very well spoken. And then eventually Ricky pitched
Something's not right about
that. No, because Ricky pitched me a bit later. He goes, after I don't know how many shows I did. I had John on and I had a few others, and Ricky pitched me. He goes, I know you got Dave for Rewind. Would you ever consider letting me come on to be co-host on Forward? Because I think we can make it interesting, and I have some ideas. And so I said, all right, Ricky, come on in. I'm still talking to John. We're in the studios. You got the link. Come in and we'll talk. And that's how Canary Kid became my co-host on NWF.
That's how he became your co-host.
Yep.
And then, so how did the talk come about then of getting this title involved, getting the NWF title involved? How did that come to be?
So I just got to thinking, I want to do something special for the NWF 40th, because the belt itself has its 40th anniversary. Steve made the belt for us back in the day, and this was in days when to get a championship belt made, nobody knew Reggie Parks. He was the only one making them, and we didn't know how to get a hold of him. Nobody, Eddie didn't even know how to get a hold of him. So we had to make all our belts were made, handcrafted in the 80s. And so we got the belt replicated again, properly, and it's really nice, and it looks like how it did back in the day. And I thought, the 40th anniversary, we should bring the belt back. It was a title that kind of represented the new era, cutting edge in wrestling. That's what we were. You didn't see this anywhere. And I'm looking at NIPW with guys like the Canary Kid and Ben Nelson and John McCann. These guys are cutting edge. They're the new era. They're doing, they're where we were, but they're much better because they're better trained. So they're in a better spot.
Yeah,
And
without a doubt.
this title could represent them. And the title, isn't just for teenagers. It's an indie title. It's an indie world title. And I said, maybe we could set up a kind of let's start it here and see if maybe we can let it kind of become a traveling title. One that could maybe go from one promotion to another promotion, kind of like how they did in the territory days.
Yeah.
Kind of for indie feds though. So, and whoever Nathan gets, eventually gets, he already has some working agreements and he gets different working agreements with different ones. We work with them. That's the whole idea. That was the thought. So I just got a hold of Nathan. I said, Nathan, this is my idea. This is what I'd like to do. I think he thought maybe I was going to pitch some Crusher versus Canary because of all the chemistry we have. But I said, no, I think it'd be better if we do, like, say, Ben Nelson, Ben versus Canary. I think that, to signify the 40th anniversary of that title, let's have them fight for the belt. Just kind of like in the way we started, it was young teenagers like they are.
Yeah.
I said, you can go anywhere with it, though. Don't limit it to teenagers. This was, Mr. X was 26 and he held the belt. So, so Nathan was like, sure. He loved it. He loved the idea. So that's how it started. That's how it got put into play.
Well, listen, before we move on to the cusp of the matter, let's just put it like that there, because there's a little bit of tension. Before I get there, let me ask you one question. So you noticed that straight off the bat, and by that, this is what I mean. I find something really scary about the dojo, and it is how high a level Nathan's training that talent in such a short period of time. Like that title identified the best young talent back in the 80s. Now that title, it could not be looking at better young talent, because north or south of this country, what Nathan is doing with that talent, and it's not one or two. It's not like he got one wee protege through when a handful of other ones that didn't. Every single person they're not only on shows, but they're succeeding, they're excelling, and they're evolving. Did you notice that straight off the bat?
For sure, because like you said, when I was doing my thing in the 80s, I was doing things that other people weren't doing. I mean, I was standing out. I just wasn't big enough, but I definitely was on the cutting edge of things, and I felt it, and I knew it, and I could do anything. I felt at the time of what the maneuvers were. So now let's fast forward to now with what Nathan's doing over there with like Ricky and Ben and John and the rest, and Crooks and all of them. Mm-hmm. He's got them at a high level caliber as well. They are also at the top of their game. Now their game is much more advanced than our game was, because it's just different eras. Wrestling has evolved, but they're definitely on the cutting edge of it, and they definitely have it down good. And I thought, if that's what we were, and this was the belt represented back then, let's bring that belt here and let's plan it here and let them run with it. And that was my thinking with this. And you're right. Not everybody's training teenagers. Nathan's one of the few. There's a couple outfits in England. It's a little bit more in Europe, but here in the United States, I think there's just a handful that are doing young kids. Mm-hmm. Sean Hernandez down in San Antonio, Joe Bird up in Michigan. And these are all guys I've had their guys come on our forward show with, and we've done interviews. And also have you watched the kids match, the exhibition match that was on the Underground show? I can't remember. That absolutely blew my mind. Yeah, it was entertaining stuff. And see, there is a market for it. You just have to make sure the kids are ready to do it. Not every kid will be ready right away.
And that's one thing, Nathan, like, he provides a really professional environment as well. Like, they're like, not to give too much away, like, the parents were like, they loved it. Like, seeing their kids in that environment, and the amount of faith and trust that they have in Nathan is so transparent. You can see it. Like, he does. It's not just like talent that is up and running, like, maybe 16, 17, 18, 19. You have them younger boys, Keaton's age, We Show, Kid Chaos as well. So he's doing it up and down the age group.
Right. And they're,
it's scary.
Well, and he's starting out with the basics. They're learning all the basics first. And that's, the fundamentals. And that's the right way to do it. Learn all that stuff, get that down. A lot of kids, I don't know how Nathan works with it, because like a lot of the kids, they want to get up on the top rope. They want to go jumping off the top rope or the second rope, and they're not ready for it. Right. So it's like, how do you zone them in? That's the hard part. with kids.
Yeah.
Kids want to do everything. They want to do it all. But I know that like we used to practice like getting thrown out of the ring. That was the thing. Like you want to make sure you go out of the, if you're gonna get thrown out of the ring, right, do it right.
Yeah.
I don't know if he's teaching them that kind of stuff though, but that's the kind of stuff you want to know though, in case it it happens in a match. Plus other things like selling, just in selling in general, make sure that's the kind of thing you want to teach too. I remember with kids, they didn't want to get vocal. Like if you're in an arm, like, you make the noise. Don't just do the expressions, right? You got to make the vocal side of it. You got to sell. And a lot of kids are just, they're kind of afraid. They don't really realize how to do it right away. I remember that being a thing, but I don't know.
That's the issue about, and that's something that can only come with experience.
Yeah. I mean, you just have to over time, but I mean, so yeah, but back to where we are though. So we got this title match coming up, and I Nathan said we can pick anybody, and we want. So I thought, well, knowing everything, and I know a little bit too with Ricky after hearing his story. After he told me how he'd go into places and he would just he wouldn't get all the opportunities that other guys would get just because of his size and his age.
Yeah.
And I know all too well that story because I dealt with that too. So part of me picked these guys because I want to pick the guys who aren't getting the opportunities for stuff and give them a chance for this world title belt, right? The NWF, because just for the fact that they're not getting the opportunities and they deserve it. So that's how I'm looking at it. That's why I picked Ben, and that's why I picked Ricky for this match.
So you talk about Ricky, you can relate to, from your days wrestling, you can relate to Ricky as well. However, let's just say things aren't really as bright as they used to be between yourself and Ricky. There's a bit of a change in Ricky. When did you notice this change beginning to happen?
Well, see, when he came in to be a co-host on Forward, he all of a sudden started referring to me as Schmucker Crossen instead of Crusher Crossen. That's when I first noticed the change with his attitude. And I think he thought maybe he just wanted to be a big shot on the podcast and just try to maybe get his whole image out there and everything and show what he's all about, but he's kind of using me then as a kind of like a springboard to do it with the podcast. So I was okay with that. I mean, if it's entertaining, but I would take it to a certain degree. But then after a while, I said, Canary, how about you get in the ring with Crusher Cross? And I brought it up to him, and he would, no, I'm not doing that. We're not going there. And, he keeps saying that's gonna, I don't want to hurt an old man.
There's no hiding that. Then you feel that, like, you were happy to accept him saying that stuff at the start, but then you definitely feel there was a line crossed in terms of respect.
Yeah, he did. He did get a little disrespectful, and he knows it, and he started it. But so like a lot of people think, am I going to be impartial with him? When I ref. Can I be impartial with Canary Kid because he's been a thorn in my side now on Forward? He always tries to needle me, but I give it right back to him too.
Oh yeah.
So I can be impartial. My thing, Johnny, I want to just have a good, clean championship match. The only problem is Canary Kid. I made a big mistake. Johnny? I thought, I'm looking at Canary's big matches that he's had. He always comes into it with overconfidence and he loses all the big matches. If you ever notice, he always keeps saying the same thing. Longest reigning NIPW Junior Heavyweight Champion. But that's all he's got. What other accomplishments? So, and then I look and I see he's lost this match, he's lost this match, he's lost this, all these title matches, right? So he's losing them. So it's like, and then I look at it and it's easy to see, if you've been around Johnny, you can see it pretty easily.
Yeah,
he's just overconfident. He's just overconfident. He said, he's broke through all the glass ceilings and he's up in the atmosphere is how he worded it last show. I'm like, okay, that's where you think you are? You need to dial it down a little bit to reality so that then that way you can come in with clear vision and focus on this and get rid of all that anger. But see, I made a mistake. I figured if he's overconfident, I'm just going to talk about Ben, his opponent. I'm going to talk him up so that way he doesn't come into this overconfident. He's going to take it serious. And it kind of backfired because Ricky, he'll never admit it, Johnny, but and I'm not taking any credit. Nathan did all the work, but I know Canary looks up to me for what I did back in the day. He knows I did something that was unique. and he knows my drop kick was sweet, and he knows there's a few other little things. And so he's been working, if you notice, ever since he met me, his drop kick has gotten really good. And that's not a coincidence. That's because he met me.
You're taking credit for the drop kick?
I'm taking credit for him perfecting it. Yes. Getting it looking
like
better.
That.
Yeah.
And what do you think's going on in his head then? Do you think that he's actually changed, that this wee bit of success, the longest reigning, has really changed him as a person? Or do you think this is him just doing what he feels he has to do? He has to put out this bravado and this hard man act, try and, he's 3 times bigger than he is. Do you think that this is an act, or do you think that this is a real, genuine change of personality in the Canary Kid?
No, I think he's changed, and he's trying to prove himself to everybody and him. He thinks he's up there, and he wants to prove it. So, and by proving it, he wants to just do it. And the problem, though, by me propping up Ben, if you've noticed, coming from me, knowing I know that Ricky, appreciates things I do, he'll never admit it. That had to hurt his feelings, and so he's mad at the person I'm propping up, and that's Ben. He's furious at him. So now he's got all this hate and anger at Ben because I keep talking about him, right? As being.
And can I just say as well, that is palpable, because you have noticed that not just at the last couple of shows, but before the show and after the show, when the fans aren't there, you can feel that energy in the room between them two, and it is not a good energy at the minute.
Yeah, they're so hateful. And here's the thing, Johnny, they were best friends before this.
Yeah.
When I announced the match to both of them, I had both Ben and Canary obviously on with me on forward, and I said we're going to have this championship match a few months ago. It wasn't a best of 3 right away, so I didn't know that, but we're going to have this championship match. They were respectful you should see it. They were respecting each other. They were respectful. They were appreciative of the opportunity. And then I started talking about Ben like I was, try to get Ricky to take this seriously more and not be overconfident. And then everything went sideways. And that's when Ricky started, just going after his knee, doing a lot of dirty tactics. Yes, he wasn't breaking the rules, but he was getting dirty.
I have to ask, before we get about this, as you say, the dirty tactics, we've heard about what Ricky's done about his change. Canary Kid has done, and his change of personality. Do you take any responsibility for things going south between the two of you?
Well, I do.
Have you ever crossed the line? Or I'm not saying you have. I'm asking you. Do you think there's any responsibility on your end, or do you think this is straight down to Canary Kid having too much going into it?
No, I think that I caused it by talking up Ben. I think that caused Ricky to really have a lot of hate and anger towards Ben because of me talking about him so highly. And he's said that as much on our show.
I don't understand that, because he's used to hearing people talk highly of Ben.
Yeah, and but coming from me and really not giving him his props, not giving Canary props, just Ben, that's the problem. And that's my fault. I'm to blame. So I'm trying to make this right. Last show, I really tried to apologize to Canary. I tried to, tell him that, look, this was wrong. I shouldn't have done that. I want you guys
I've seen that, and that was a genuine apology.
It was genuine, but if you notice, Canary put his guard up and just, he didn't accept it. And I expected it. I figured that's what he was going to get. And I tried not to, Johnny, he's saying that I'm bronze or silver and he's gold. And look at everything that I've done when I was his age. I did so much more than just wrestling. I'm like, I didn't want to rub that in his face. I didn't want to if you think you're gold and that makes me platinum, that wouldn't have got me anywhere with what I'm trying to accomplish with Ricky. I want him to just forget this, and accept the apology, and let's go forward and try to save the friendship, because their friendship is in peril right now. And there is one thing in this wrestling business that people need to realize that is the only thing that lasts forever is friendships that you make. And if you destroy them or you fracture them, sometimes they're never going to get back again. You're never going to get them repaired. They're permanent. And everything else comes and goes, including the championship belt. And right now, Canary wants that belt because for 2 things. He wants to rub it into my face and say, look, I got it. And he wants to rub it in Ben's face. And he's just putting his eyes on that belt. And Ben also wants the belt. So they're putting that belt first. And the friendship is all on the back burner if they even care about it. But what they don't know, Johnny, is that friendship, when this all settles and one of them wins with it, going into the match like this, and then they realize their friendship is gone,
they're
going to regret that for the rest of their life. And that's what I'm going to try to convey to them this Friday when I'm there live in person with our next podcast. I'll have both Ben and Ricky with me, and we're going to talk about that.
Do you think that's a wise idea? Do you think you can control that situation? We know you're going to be the special guest referee in the actual match, but they have them too, and especially with the way Canary Kid runs his mouth.
Well, I'm hoping, because if I start making them realize the friendship, because here's the thing, they might be at each other's throats right now, but the friendship's real. And if I can trigger the memories and emotions of their friendship, I might be powerful enough to overcome some of this and dial them back down. I can tell you right now, you've seen how Canary reacted, right? When I apologized and all the things I said. I can tell you right now, after 2 or 3 days and this settling with him, he's starting to second guess some of the things he said. I can guarantee you that. And by the time we get to Friday, this might even be more resonated with him. So I think I can. Look, I have to try. It's my fault that he's so mad and angry, and I take full responsibility. So this is my only way I can do it. I said, Nathan, can we do it in the dojo? I want to have it in an atmosphere that's going to really bring them together for where they both are. They both started there. This is a good spot to do this.
Mm-hmm.
Now, granted, we're in a wrestling ring and they're right there, but then again, I'm the ref. So, if I can't control them here, how am I going to control them in a match? So I think I can keep them in control. I think we can make this work.
Keeping it under control is one thing, and I asked you this last night as well, and I won't say it rattled you, but I had to ask the question: if he gets in your face, if he starts to trash talking, gives you a shove, doing the usual Canary Kid tactics that we've seen of late, will you be able to control your temper?
Yeah. I mean, I can only go back to the old school refs. Referees had to set the standard. They had to set that they're in charge. So if you shoved a ref will shove you back twice as hard. That's how you have to do it. You have to let them know, don't do that again.
Yeah.
So yes, if Canary shoves me, he will get shoved right back and maybe might fall right on his rear end. He'll get the hint. But I mean, I'm hoping he doesn't do that, because if he keeps shoving me, I'll have to disqualify him.
Yeah.
But and that goes for any other thing he might try to do that might be close to the breaking rules. His dirty tactics aren't rule breaking, but if I see a closed fist at all or something like that, that could get him. So I just hope he doesn't let his anger is so out of control right now and so lately that he could do a closed fist. That's what happens. That's how you start throwing punches. So we'll just have to see. Well,
look, I always have to be neutral in this, obviously. So you've done a lot talking now about Canary Kid and how what you said, he's took this personally, and you can see that it's, it's annoyed him, it's upset him. Now you're talking to me. Do I get the hint that it's maybe annoyed you a little bit deep down as well, more than you're letting on?
As far as what was that now? Annoying me how?
Do you think it's annoyed you a little bit more than you're letting on, like on a personal level?
Well, the things he said to me, as far as he only looks up to 3 people or whatever, and I'm not one of them, even though I said I was, that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. Look, I got too much pride for that. That doesn't bother me there. He can't, that doesn't hurt me. And I know that was just the hate and anger talking. It wasn't him, because I know how he really feels. When we're off camera, when the camera's on, Canary Kid turns into a different Canary. I mean, Ricky's Canary Kid, and he's going to be a lot more passionate with what he's doing. So, and that's just kind of his passion mixed with anger. So I didn't think of that too much. What annoys me is he knows. See, part of Canary Kid does understand that this is an important match. Part of him understands the heritage and the lineage of the championship, and to maybe give it the respect it deserves. He knows this, and he knows how much it means to me. And when he comes in saying he's going to do it his way and he doesn't care, that's not only an insult to me, it's an insult to the belt. And that part annoys me. I want him to treat the belt with respect, right? Treat the match with respect. And to do that, he has to treat Ben with respect. You don't do it any other way. And that doesn't mean you don't come in. That doesn't mean you go into the match and take it easy and pat each other on the back. You go in there and you fight it out hard. You fight it out strong. You give everything you got. You give everything Nathan's taught them. You put it on the line. but you don't.
But then
do it.
can I just ask this question? If again trying to be neutral and playing devil's advocate here, so please forgive me. I don't mean this as an offensive question. You're saying that Ricky's not respecting the belt, but then you're saying what you want the most out of this is for them to respect the belt. So I get that, but a difficult question to ask. Could this be a case of wanting your cake and eating it, because you're wanting them to respect the belt, but at the same time, you don't want them to put their friendship at jeopardy for the belt? But surely does that not beg the question? The belt is more prestigious than the friendship. And if you want to get to the very top, you have to make a decision that ain't easy.
True. But what I mean by that though, Johnny, is I don't want Canary to do his dirty pool. I don't want him to kick Ben's knee. I don't want him to go after that. Those are the kind of things I want him not to do. I want him to be aggressive. I want him to be cocky if that's his style. I just don't want him to be doing the dirty play and dirty pool. That's
you want him to earn it.
Yeah, I want him to earn it, because if he goes into the match like that, and Ben goes into the match like that, one of them's going to win, one of them's going to lose, but they will both come out of it feeling a lot better than they went into it, versus doing it the other way. Because that's going to be worse. I mean, I've been in matches that went both ways.
Something. It's not just annoying you, that's annoying everybody, because everybody's seen Canary Kid grow and Ben grow through NIPW. But that's annoying a lot of people, is the fact that he's now taking underhanded tactics. As you say about the crutch, that's something Canary Kid's never really needed to do. He maybe toyed with that sort of stuff early on in his career. But what made him the longest reigning NXT champion was being better than other people. And now seeing him resorting to lifting that, listen, I try to stay neutral, as I'm saying, but that is irritating to see. And it's frustrating, not just because of the dirty pull, as you call it, but because you know that without doing that, he is still capable of doing everything that he says he's going to do. However, we spent a lot of time talking about Canary Kid here.
Yeah.
There's two people in this match.
That's right.
And this is just what my 2 cents is. I think at the minute, Ben Nelson is sitting at home laughing and rubbing his hands, because he's just. I genuinely think all this tension between the belt, between the special guest referee, the personal element between yourself and Ricky that is undoubtedly there and has been damaged, if I can say that. I think Ben's just sitting back. I referenced this last night. His brother Jordan was in that 5-way scramble match, and in that 5-way scramble match there was few different stories going on at once, and out of nowhere, Jordan came in and took that belt. And I genuinely can see the same thing happening with Ben. All this is happening. Nobody's really paying attention to Ben. I think he's going to just come in and say, "Let me show you."
Well,
what do you think?
I've been paying attention to Ben, and
I know you're paying attention.
I'll tell you this though, like I don't get to interact with him because he's not on the show with me every week, like every other week, like Ricky is. And so I'm obviously interacting more with Ricky, but with Canary Kid. But with Ben Nelson, I've been following him. I've been watching him. And one thing I've noticed since we even set this match, 3 months ago, Ben in the last 3 months has came from here to here. He's really picked up his game, and it's very evident.
And every aspect of his game.
Yeah, and you can see it. And he's definitely in a, on a momentum. And what I was happy to see is I didn't like when he went with the crutch and took Canary out, but he's so mad and angry himself that he got the best of him in that moment. And I think Ben listened to me when I said, "Ben, what are you doing?" I got on Ben for that when he did that. I said, "This isn't."
Well, you noticed you said something there, and I have to say I agree with you. I think it was actually last night you said it about you seen a different side to Ben at that last match where he was a lot more like at the start of the match. I noticed that myself during the intros. Usually Ben's out there and he's flicking the mullet and he's giving the Playboy pose. He's doing the strut. He's doing all that. But that match I looked over and he was just in the corner, and I hadn't seen that side of him before. But it worked for him.
It did work for him, and he can still be flamboyant, but just make sure when the bell rings, it's down to business. And if he does that, he's got a fighting chance. But here's the reality, Johnny. I keep calling him Ricky. I want to refer to him as Canary Kid because that's his character. Canary Kid has experience. He's had a championship before, and he's had championship matches. Ben hasn't. So that experience is what Canary's strength is. And if he just clears his head, I want to say this quick. Canary always says heart and soul of NIPW. Does a little motion. And what he's so filled up with hate and anger, I told him the other week, I said, Canary, you think it's heart and soul, but it's really the hate and anger that you have that has consumed your heart and soul. And so to you, it's heart and soul, but everybody else is just either hate and anger. That's why they're booing you. And I'm trying to explain this to him. So, so Canary, if he can clear his mind from this rage and anger issues, then he'll get back to his roots and come in with all that experience. He's going to be difficult to beat if he does that. Now, Ben, here's Ben's situation. He's on a real momentum. He's really coming along, and he's the underdog, no matter what way you look at it. He is an underdog in this situation, but underdogs can win, and they do win. And the way an underdog is going to win is by taking a chance or a risk, something that Canary is not expecting or doesn't see coming. So Ben's got to think outside the box. What can he hit him with that he knows that he doesn't see coming or doesn't think that Ben knows how to do? That's how Ben's going to win this match. And I think back to Zaire, 1974, Muhammad Ali against George Foreman, and nobody thought Ali was going to win that fight. He was an underdog big time. And not only did Ali win it, he knocked him out. So it can happen. Ben can win this thing for sure. And it just depends who's going to show up and how they're going to, go into the match, really. And if, there is a chance too that Canary can come into this with all that hate and anger and win. That can happen.
That's what I want to ask you about, because you're talking now about Canary Kid being a little bit unsufferable at the minute. If he goes in there and he sticks to this new personality that he seems to have, and he comes out on top, can you think of what he's going to be like to listen to then?
Right. But I can tell you this, and this is what I'm going to convey to Canary when I see him in person Friday at the dojo. He could chance it and do that and maybe win the match. But if he does, the regret he's going to feel for the next 40 years, like I have, he'll regret it for the rest of his life. And that's a fact. And I only can say that because I'm living it. I did that.
That's the thing. You're doing it. You've walked in them boots. You've done it.
Yeah.
And is it not history repeating itself as well? Because you go back and we talked there about the shits that you had, and that friendship that was never the same again. Even though back then you shook hands one day, he came out during the promo and buried it. It was never the same again.
It's never the same.
Do you think all these years later, this is history repeating itself? And not only that, do you think can this relationship between yourself and Canary be salvaged?
Anything can be salvaged. The damage isn't done yet with, until the match, for as far as Ricky and Ben's relationship, that until the match happens, nothing's fully damaged quite yet. As far as me and Canary Kid,
it's used to, I mean.
Yeah, we can, I'll tell you this much. If he goes into the match and listens to me for a change and just actually tries it, even win or lose, he'll come out of that feeling a lot better than he went in. And I think he might start appreciating more than I told him, even if he loses, he's already lost championship matches the way he's been trying it. So, if he tries it a different way, maybe it might work for him. He's just got to give it a shot. He has nothing to lose, what I'm trying to tell you. His track record right now with his new style is a big goose egg. He hasn't won a championship match since. So, and he's had a few. So, and this is another thing, Johnny, this is a world title. This isn't just a championship. This is actually it has the world title status. So when he goes into, whoever gets this, whether it's Ben or Ricky, when they go into other promotions, I keep saying it could be either one of these guys. They're gonna say, hey, can we I'd like to defend, and he might get better matchups. He might get better matchups with other indie guys. So this could make,
they're basically carrying a bit more clout on their shoulder with that belt.
A little more, yes, exactly. And so that means something.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that they both have plans that they want to do with that. So, I think it's just great that it's just the belt's going to be born again over there, and it's going to have a new life. And now, and I told them guys, whoever wins, get ready, because everybody in NIPW as well, they're going to be wanting a shot at that, and they're going to want to take it from you. You don't know who's going to be coming after you once you get that. Mark my words. You're going to have everybody wanting that thing. Remember, you don't have to be a teenager. That's the thing everybody's got to remember.
I can tell you now, it's going to be a sellout at the curtain, as they say. Everybody's going to want to see what unfolds with this one. The thing with Ricky is, listen, I love Canary Kid, I really do, but I've no, like, the change is undeniable in Canary Kid. But at the same time, do you think it could be a case of, whenever you're a kid and somebody tells you not to do something, it's the first thing you want to do?
When they tell you not to do something?
Exactly. So do you think, could it be a case that he's just too young to know better?
Exactly.
I don't mean that in a patronizing way, because he's achieved more in wrestling than I ever will. Like,
he's not aware of what he's doing. He's unaware of his situation, is what it is. And like, when he comes in and like says he's up in the atmosphere somewhere, he's not looking at himself accordingly of where he really is at. I'm not saying that Canary or Ben are bad. They're not. They're very good, but he's not at that pinnacle that he thinks he's at. So that's Rick, Ricky's problem, Canary Kid. He's got to dial it down a little bit. And everybody's been telling him that. We had Tina Louise on last week. She's a gear maker. She said the same thing. She sees it.
Yeah. Everybody's telling him that.
Everybody's telling him that. So, maybe if he hears it enough, he might realize it. I think people will resonate.
Well, I have to ask as well, what happens if, so say Ricky does win, like I put that scenario to you earlier, and you say you want this title, your main goal is for this title to be respected and acknowledged for what it is. So what happens if Ricky wins that title, but he continues giving the two big fingers up to everybody around him and beating his own drum and starts putting a legacy onto that belt that you don't like? What happens then? Can you talk to me? Do you think that's something you can sit back and watch?
Well, if that happens, this is where Nathan Hoy keeps talking me into coming back, because he wants to see if he thinks the belt gets disrespected, he wants the one person that would not like that to come back. Yeah. I don't know if I'd ever get in the ring again, though, Johnny, honestly, although I could. And
you think so? You think you can still go in there and do it? I
could, but it's just, I don't know. I like the memories of me back in the day, and stuff. But if he gets like that, I mean, I hope not. Look, I'm gonna really be working hard on this next podcast. Here's the thing, when you look in somebody's eyes, and I can see Canary's eyes on the podcast, when there's part of him that's still there. I can still see the real Canary Kid that's in there. Part of him is there. He's got this tough guy outer image, but if you see through that and you see that, I can feel it, I can hear it, I can see it, and sometimes I, even talks like it, and so it's there. So the more I've been working at this several shows now with him, and I think my goal is to resonate with him so that he goes into this match and does the right thing. And I tell you something, you might surprise him. Maybe, maybe we can salvage things. Maybe not. That's just hard to say. We'll have to see how this podcast goes, really. On Friday night, we'll be live. That one will be on the NIPW channel as well.
Yeah, without a doubt. Yeah. I have to ask you, like, I've kind of alluded to that just before now. We have to wrap it up here real quick shortly. But do you think you're going to need security there for that interview? Or is there any contingency plan in store there? Because listen, mate, I really, just between us, it's not good between them. Like, it's
not good there. But here's the thing, though. Remember, I told you Canary Kid respects me.
Yeah,
he does. He doesn't say it, but he does, and I know Ben does.
Well, he shows it in his actions, not his words.
With Ben?
Yeah, no, with Ricky, Canary Kid. He might not say it, but he shows it in his actions that he listens to you and respects you.
Yeah, exactly. And he does too. And so the fact that I'm there in person and the fact that I know there's respect, I think you'll see them be civil with me there. I really do. I don't think you're going to see this, like I like to say, a shit show.
Yeah.
I don't. And if they do, I will separate them if I have to. Look, the thing with me is I will it's law and order, man. If things get out of hand, I will separate them apart. If I can't do it here, how am I going to do it in a match? So
See, but this
No.
is my worry. So I'm sorry, I have to say this again, being neutral. See, whenever you're talking there, I see that old wrestler in you. I see them eyes turning a wee bit black.
Yeah.
So, like, if you're doing that now in a podcast, what's it going to be if it's 20 minutes into that match and Canary Kid is in your face and calling you all the names of the day and the most disparaging comments? I don't know if you're going to be able to keep your temper.
Yeah, I mean, honestly though, if he's in a world title match, the last thing you better be doing is worrying about getting in my face. He better be worried about Ben.
Yeah.
So I don't know if he'll be doing all that, but if he does, look, in a match, it's not anything he says isn't going to bother me. He can say whatever he wants. He starts shoving me though, I'm going to shove him back. But other than that, I'm not going to get this. I'm not going to let his words bother me.
There you go again. See, just like there's something in you as wrestlers. Just the minute you say that about I'll shove him black, your eyes just go that sharky look in your eyes, and you see that old wrestler in you. Like,
but Johnny, you have to though. If you let the wrestlers, it's kind of like letting the inmates run the asylum. If you let them dictate all that, if you don't put that force in there, they will keep testing you. All it's going to take is one shove back, and it won't happen again. Trust me, you'll get the hint. So I'm not worried about it. I've been in that situation before. So, I've done the shoving before. So I know how the rest will shove you back. So, and you don't want to test
we sit and say that about Canary Kid, but again, we're ignoring Ben Nelson here because he could piss you off every bit as much as Canary Kid do. Like on his day, he can use a tactic or two if he wants.
If he does, yeah. But I told both of them, if I see what resembles a closed fist, if I see a shot below the solar plexus or anything that's going to be in the ways of illegal, I will disqualify you so fast, and the belt's going to your opponent. So I put the fear in them to know that they don't want to lose on. That's the worst way to lose it. So you don't want to do that. So do
you think you're going to have to require a pat down or a search before the match, or?
Oh yeah, well,
is it mandatory?
I was planning on with the territory rules to do a pat down anyway, just to make sure. Not that they would have anything, but yeah, we'll check them. I'll check them, I should say. We'll
You're
do
really
that.
showing a bit too much face there. You don't think I say Ricky could have something all right?
Oh yeah, will he let me check him? He better. Sometimes wrestlers would not want you to pat him down, even. So we'll see.
Yeah, we're all up to date. Going to bring it to an end. We know what's happening this weekend. Lions Den Pro Wrestling Dojo, Wrestleclash, NWF Worlds Heavyweight Championship Best of 3 rubber match. The Canary Kid versus the Bangor Beauty, Ben Nelson. Special guest referee, Crossen. So my last question to you is A and B question. Okay. A, who do you think is going to win? And if you can answer it, B, who do you want to win?
All right, that's a tough one. As the referee, I need to be impartial, so I cannot give you that answer. As far as I can't tell you who I think's going to win. I'll tell you who I want to win. I want the better wrestler to win, and the better wrestler to me is the one who's listening to what I'm telling them to do as far as how to do this match. That's the better wrestler. That's the one that, if they fight that, if you fight by the rules and you do everything clean, you're gonna be better in the end. And so I'm hoping that the better wrestler wins, whoever that is, whether that's Ben, whether that's Canary. I honestly, Johnny, I am happy with either one of them winning. To me, it's a win-win-win here. The fact that the belt's coming back into play, the fact that I get to referee it, and the fact that somebody's going to get that belt again. So I don't have any skin in the game that way. So it's like, I'm not, and I don't have a problem. Look, I'm pretty tough-skinned. I can take the abuse that Canary and Ricky's been giving me on the podcast. And it's going to take more than what he's been doing to really get under my skin.
It's thicker skin than that.
Right. And if you ever notice, when I get on Ricky's case, if you look at his face, he definitely understands that, I mean well for him. You can see it. The wheels are turning. So I don't know I don't know what we're going to get here. I got to be honest. We'll just have to see. Are we going to get that old Canary? Are we going to get something else? Maybe the fact that I'm there, he might be altogether different in this match.
Yeah.
You never know what's going to happen. And Ben too. we keep talking
think-
about Canary, but like you said, Ben's in this too.
Yeah, and that's my prediction. I think Ben's going to come in with the attention, most of the spotlight not being on him, and I think he's going to take advantage of that. But listen, we'll wrap it up here, and I want to give you the last words. I think everybody's going to have to tune in to this podcast that you're doing on Friday. That's going to set the standard for what they can expect at the show the next day. So advise everybody to tune into that. Will that be on your channel and NIPW's YouTube channel?
Exactly. It'll be on our channel, it'll be on NIPW's YouTube channel, and it'll be on Wrestling Revolution Keaton's channel. So there'll be 3 of them.
Right. Well,
and then we got to tune in to see what happens there, to see, what comes of it, because that's going to be the kind of the eve of the championship match, really, with both of them. So
yeah. Well, last words on you then, Crusher. I want you to address each party, Ben and Canary Kid. And what are your final thoughts between these two? Your last pieces of advice before you leave America to come to Ireland. What is your last pieces of advice for both competitors in this match?
All right, well, let's start with Ben Nelson. Ben, you were the one that suggested this. This was Ben's idea, by the way. Ben was the one that said, how about he wanted to know if Ricky would be interested in fighting him for the belt. He actually brought it up. So I know you want this. And if you want this, you have to realize your mentor, he knows more than you, and he's got more experience, and he has your number as of right now. So you've got to think outside the box. You got to think, what can I do that Canary's not going to see coming? What can I do that he won't know, won't expect? The element of surprise is how somebody who's maybe an underdog in your case a little bit. Element of surprise is what's going to get somebody with experience. So you got to find something. Now, when I say take a risk, that means it's a risk. That means it could backfire on you. But that's what you got to do. You got to take a risk in order to overcome it. And Ben, if you just do that and stick away from the anger, don't use the crutch, no more cheating, none of that. Just go in there and give it everything you got. And you're going to have to give it 100. If you're going 100%, you're going to have to go 120% against him. That's what it's going to take, because believe me, he will be. Yeah, so that's what you 100%. Need to do, Ben. Yeah, you need to go into it, very strong, very, very good, but think outside the box. You got to hit him with something he doesn't even know you know. You got to hit him with something like that. That's my advice to Ben. And now for Canary Kid, Canary, you went on here a week ago on the podcast and you said a lot of, I was sincere to you and I tried to give you a sincere apology and you just didn't accept it. But I do know how you feel, and I know how you feel, and I know that you do have respect for all of this. And Ricky, you just got to bring that up from the depths and start overtaking this hate and anger that you got right now, because that's the hate and anger that you showed us last week. And if you can get out of that and start focusing again, because then what's going to happen is the world that's upside down right now is going to turn right side up, and you're going to see it with clear vision. And that's what you need to do. And then you take all your experience and everything you got and you put it on the line. That's how you're going to win, if you can do that. So Ben, he's going to win by taking some chances. Ricky, you're going to win with experience and clear vision. And I tell you something, if we get that, we have one heck of a good championship match that's going to take place.
And I think the other winner there is going to be the Northern Ireland Pro Wrestling fan base as well. Yeah. Speaking of which, any words towards the NIPW fan base before you leave?
Oh, I think it's great atmosphere. I really like the dojo. I love watching all this. I used to watch Keaton stuff first, and then now I'm seeing the professional stuff that they're doing out there with the multiple cameras. And you guys are so fortunate to have a nice, tight, it's like it's a very tight atmosphere, and those are the most best atmospheres you can get, because it's just tight quarters. It's tight. You can feel the energy. And I can't wait to go in there and feel it. I don't know how I'm going to be receptive, Johnny. I hope they like me, because I have gotten on Canary's case quite a bit. So, and I know that he might still have fans out there, but look, all I can tell you is that what I get on Canary Kid for, it was all in good intentions. I'm just trying to get the best out of him. And so I'm not trying to, look, I'm one of his biggest advocates, and Ben's. I think they're both spectacular. And
Yeah.
I think we couldn't have two better people doing this for this match. So to see all the fans in NPW, I'm just looking forward to it. I just hope they don't get, like I told you guys, I hope they don't get tired of my accent.
No. Listen, you will be greeted with open arms, 100%. And if anybody in this world knows how the Canary Kid is, it's the fans in the dojo. So you're safe there. Keaton is an exception for sticking with him this long. That has to be said, but we'll forgive him for it.
Let me just tell you on Keaton quick. He is his number one fan. And I kind of got on him a little bit last week with you, or the other day, I guess, right? With you. Because he's such a fan, but I forget that he has been supporting Canary since he started. And it's hard to just throw, he's seen what I'm seeing, but at the same time, he thinks that Canary's way up on that pedestal. So it's like, I don't want to crush him on this. Yeah. I have nothing against Wrestling Revolution Keaton for sticking up for his guy. Nothing at all.
Yeah, no, definitely not. And as you say, what people might not know, it's not only the fan aspect of it as well, but it's like Canary Kid's one of them people that's passing on that wisdom down to Keaton in the ring line.
Exactly. Yeah.
So I can completely understand where Keaton's coming from, but all I was saying was there's other fans in the dojo that know exactly what Canary Kid's like. Listen, Crusher, thank you so much for taking the time. I know it's been a handful to try and get this organised, mostly on my end. Thank you once again, not only for taking time for the podcast, but for putting your trust with your history, your legacy, and your reputation in the hands of NIPW. And I can assure you that your belt and your history is in safe hands.
And thank you, Johnny. And I'm really looking forward. I'll be leaving here in a few days to head over there. So I can't wait. And we're looking forward to coming over there. It's going to be great.
That was brilliant. And I cannot wait to meet you in person. Crusher, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Guys, we'll see everybody this weekend. Lions Den Pro Wrestling Dojo for NIPW Wrestleclash.
All right.